Good evening. Welcome. We have a quorum, so we're going to get started. I'm going to ask, before I do that, I want to thank you all for joining us here this evening and helping us conduct the town's business. I want to thank several folks for putting this evening's agenda together and dealing with the logistics of the meeting. While I preside here, I have very little to do with the preparation for the meeting. We rely on other people to do that. So I want to thank Travis Ahern, our town administrator, Liz Greendale, the town clerk, Jay Talman, our town council, and Chief Cassidy, who's dealt with the logistics of it. And I thank them in advance of the meeting for doing a good job and putting us in a position to be able to do the town's business, hopefully efficiently. I'm going to ask Chief Cassidy to give us a brief explanation about the logistics and what we expect of the speakers this evening. We anticipate that we will have an overflow crowd, so there will be some folks who will be joining us in the cafeteria. And I've decided that we'll proceed on voice votes, and with respect to those matters that are unanimous, we'll just proceed. If they're not unanimous, since we're dealing on a voice vote, then I will go into the cafeteria to listen to the vote myself so that I can report whether or not the voice vote prevails. I want to be respectful of your time this evening and do what we can do to do the town's business efficiently. And finally, I would just say that there are one or more agenda items this evening about which reasonable people can differ. I welcome debate. I welcome spirited debate. I welcome expressions of differences of opinion. I don't welcome personal attacks. So I want to encourage everybody to keep the debate this evening civil. Hopefully I won't have to intervene with respect to that protocol, and I'll encourage everybody to make their point. You can make it forcefully, make it direct, but make it respectful. Please, Chief, tell us about the logistics for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Michael Cassidy, 51 Burnap Road, Fire Chief. So if you find yourself in an overflow room, and there are two of them, there are room monitors, and if you wish to speak, you can let them know so that they can let the folks on the stage know so that the moderator will recognize you. If you are in an overflow room, you need to step outside to use the iPad to speak so that there is not feedback in the main seating area. There's seating for 100 people in the cafeteria. There's seating already set up for 25 in the field house, and there's an additional capacity of more than 175 additional seats in the field house if we need them. So again, there is a room monitor in each of the overflow rooms. Let them know if you wish to speak to be heard on a particular article. They can alert the folks on the stage, and then when you are recognized by the moderator, you can speak clearly into the iPad, and folks in the other rooms as well as the main room will be able to hear you. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Okay, thank you. Then we'll proceed. Prior to Article 1, we have the usual motion to permit non-residents to speak during the course of town meeting. For the benefit of those who are home without a warrant with them, I'll read the names so that there's no misunderstanding. The motion is moved that the following non-residents and non-voting town officials and consultants to committees be allowed to speak during the course of this annual town meeting. Scott Moles, Health Director, Agent Leslie McConnell, Library Director Sharon Emmerich, Town Accountant Catherine Pierce, Principal Assessor, Susan Kutzka, Superintendent of Holliston Public Schools, Dan McLeod, Director of Technology for the School Department, Sean Reese, DPW Director, Karen Sherman, Town Planner, Mark Kafferline, Building Commissioner, Matt Stone, Police Chief, Chris Mayo, Technology Director, Ryan Clapp, Conservation Agent, John Evans, Superintendent, Keefe School, Dolores Sharrock, Finance Director, Keefe School, Travis Ahern, Town Administrator, Mary Busquet, Treasurer Collector, Jason Talaman, Town Council, Dan Brown, Special Labor Counsel, Jacqueline Weiner, Youth and Family Services Director, Lisa Borchetta, Senior Center Director, Donna Walsh, Animal Control Officer, Mark Frank, Director of Parks and Rec, and Matt Zedek, Sustainability Coordinator. Our bylaw requires a town meeting vote to allow non-residents to address town meetings. Is there a second for that motion? Second. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? So voted. Article 1. This is going to be a consent agenda similar to what we did at the last town meeting. In the interest of reserving our time for topics which generally engender discussion, we're going to seek to consolidate a number of very routine articles that generally generate no debate. That does not mean that debate will not be permitted on it. So the explanation is that in order to expedite the consideration of routine items, Articles 3, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17 will be considered for approval in a single vote without debate. I'll read each article's number and title, and if 7 members of the meeting rise to say hold, the item will be removed so that it may be debated in the normal course. The remaining articles will be considered individually as printed in the warrant. For those of you who are regulars at town meeting, you'll recognize these articles, and for those of you who are not regulars at town meeting, you can be provided with the explanation that these are routine articles needed to conduct the town's business, but rarely, if ever, generate debate. The first one, Article 3, authorizes the town treasurer collector to sell foreclosed tax title properties. Article 11, non-substantive bylaw numbering changes, not changing the bylaw, but merely changing the numbering of the paragraphs. Article 12 will authorize the Select Board to sell surplus equipment. Article 13 is authorization to expend Chapter 90 State Aid for Highways program. Article 14 will amend the interest rate per annum. Article 15, amend the income requirements. Article 16, veterans tax exemptions. Article 17, revolving fund spending limits. The motion is to approve the articles in the consent agenda as those articles are printed in the warrant. Is there a second? Is there any discussion or any holds that any member wishes to see placed? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed? So voted. Article 1, to hear the report of the Select Board. The motion is moved that the annual report of the town for the 12-month period ending June 30th, 2020 be accepted. Is there a second? The explanation offered is copies of the report are available at the voter check-in tables at the town hall and online at the town's website. It's available at the town hall after town meeting. In both the back of the town report and the warrant document, we find a citizen volunteer form. Information is available from the Select Board's office at 508-429-0608. The Select Board encourages anyone who may be interested in serving the town on a committee or in a volunteer capacity to complete the form and either leave it with us tonight or send it to Town Hall. You'll also find a reminder in the back of the warrant document for form to contact information on the town's Blackboard notification system. Does the Select Board want to be heard with respect to the article? Mr. Cronin?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Good evening, everyone. On behalf of my peers, Ben Sparrow, Tina Hine, welcome to the annual town meeting. Next slide. As with our July and December town meetings, we are conducting our business under public health guidelines to ensure your safety. Physical distancing, mask wearing, and movement within the space is designated to minimize contact. So please help us make this a successful and safe meeting. The content of the warrant has been publicly discussed and debated by a variety of sources, including the Finance Committee, which offers its corresponding recommendations as required by state law and town bylaws. Quick note, there is no content up for discussion or vote at this meeting regarding 555 Hopping Brook and the project therein. The Planning Board is the special permit granting authority for the town and currently has an open public hearing on that matter. This evening, I'd like to form my remarks around the following 4 areas. Number 1, the overall state of Holliston. Number 2, warrant highlights. Number 3, FY21 highlights. And finally, number 4, looking ahead into FY22. The overall state of Holliston in FY21 has been dominated by the COVID-19 management. The Select Board met weekly with our Emergency Management Director, Fire Chief Mike Cassidy, to receive updates on local impact, cases, positivity rates, trends, as well as financial requests from eligible sources in town to offset their needs to keep workplaces safe for employees and citizens. To date, the Select Board has managed to distribute $733,437 of our $1.317 million grant. Holliston has tracked 801 COVID-positive cases with 8 fatalities since the declaration of emergency was made in March 2020. Our positivity rate has recently dropped to 1.9, which is a very favorable development. And just briefly, I wanted to show folks the topics that the CARES Act has been spent on relevant to our response, including personal protective equipment for first responders, disinfecting public buildings, which is an ongoing expense, food for families, enhanced telework capacity, technology to facilitate distance learning, rent and mortgage relief through our Youth and Family Services Group, and finally, unemployment insurance costs. Like other communities, we're making great strides to get vaccinated. As the following table shows, we are quickly approaching 50% of our population as fully vaccinated. Most importantly, our seniors have achieved near perfect vaccination rates. If you could show that slide, Chris, that would be great. In addition, this year we hired a new town administrator, Travis Ahern, on July 20th, 2020. Many of you may remember his first day on the job was our annual town meeting last year. He's had an immediate impact preparing a flawless special town meeting in December and then managed the FY22 budget process into the product you will see under the upcoming omnibus budget. The Select Board's been heavily involved with traffic management issues this year. We've addressed longstanding issues involving commercial traffic on several of our neighborhood streets. Conducting a public meeting in August, the board moved to identify funds in the special town meeting to hire a traffic engineering firm to study the flow of commercial traffic on several streets identified as having high rates of such traffic. Working with Mass DOT and our state senator and state representative, we finalized a report in April to the state appealing for permanent relief from commercial traffic for South Street, Woodland, High Street, Locust, Fisk, Bullard Street, and Lowland Street. Based upon strong supporting documentation from the engineering study, we expect a favorable approval from MassDOT in the next 1 to 2 months to restrict commercial traffic from these areas, finally delivering relief for residents. Warrant highlights. We're presenting 37 articles for town meeting consideration. As you just heard, about 8 of them were moved in consent. So we're trimming down our debate to some extent, but nevertheless, before us is a rather hefty warrant. We will motion, as we just did, to move those articles through. So I'll move on to that. Articles 9 and 10 present proposals from the Governance Committee. This committee was formed in 2020 and provided a 3-year term to review and make recommendations to town meeting on all facets of Holliston's governance structure. The Select Board understands these articles have generated community interest and dialogue. We encourage a civil and thorough debate this evening to help our town evolve and embrace the opportunity to challenge the status quo for the greater good. Regarding sustainability, we hired a sustainability coordinator within last year, and we're looking to tap into opportunities using income from projects as well as grants to fund opportunities to reduce waste and carbon emissions. Articles 24 and 25 reflect that. 24 creates a revolving fund that supports recycling initiatives using new non-taxpayer revenue sources. Article 25 creates a revolving fund that supports proposed electric vehicle charging stations using non-taxpayer revenue sources. Regarding infrastructure, the Select Board is committed to maintaining assets, meeting or exceeding the residents' expectations for service and improving treasured spaces throughout our town. Articles 31, 32, and 33 address those concerns. 31 is the Blair Square Design and Engineering article. Over 160,000 people have visited Blair Square during the past 12 months. It is a park and walk spot for safe routes to school. It will host the upcoming Holliston Farmers Market this summer. This design and engineering documents are needed before making future improvements. You'll be hearing a little bit more of those details under Article 31 this evening. Article 32 deals with 9 Green Street. This is a property the town now owns. We've had a committee look into its condition and applicable use. We are now recommending through Article 32 demolition of the property so we can reimagine the space in ways to improve the downtown area. Article 33 is a feasibility study for the DPW facility. If folks understand our current infrastructure, we have 2 facilities for the DPW. Both are legacy properties that are well beyond their useful life. So we're looking for a study to examine the consolidated facility and the potential costs associated with that. Article 34 is pedestrian and school zone safety. In keeping with the theme this year of monitoring traffic and safety within our community, this article supports and improves safe routes to schools for children and improves safety for all road users who travel in the Woodland Street School Zone. As you'll note, the Select Board does track unfortunate events involving injuries and vehicle crashes. We think quality of life is an important part of living in Holliston. This particular article, we think, will help enforce or definitely improve our quality of life. FY21 highlights. Over the past fiscal year, over 23 projects were undertaken. These projects improve our public safety infrastructure, access to downtown and the rail trail, the senior center, historic library, our public works infrastructure, water treatment infrastructure, and historic town hall. Please note on this page, I'm just giving you a brief update on some of these articles, many of which you've seen in prior town meetings that were approved. We wanted to provide you with an update. The traffic preemption receiving equipment has been added to intersections along Washington Street. The transmitters were added to police and fire fleet vehicles. The replacement tone voice pagers were ordered for both fire and ambulance personnel. Microwave links added to the public safety radio infrastructure network, improving signal strength and quality for police and fire personnel. The infrastructure articles passed in December are in progress. These are articles that will be studying sidewalks and water modernization. We'll be seeing the results of those particular articles likely at our special town meeting this fall. Our water treatment plant is breaking ground this month. The plant is projected to be online in summer of 2022. Town hall floor replacement and refinishing is completed. It's absolutely stunning. If you folks have a chance to see it, I highly recommend you see the investment of time and your money into the improvement of the historic building. We have new doors in Town Hall that have greatly enhanced the appearance and accessibility. Furthermore, the Senior Center has received interior improvements, carpeting, interior painting, ceiling tile replacement. Similarly, at the library, we did interior improvements as well. A lot of that was made possible because of COVID, much less foot traffic, and the opportunity arose. It's greatly enhanced those assets. And finally, the library masonry and front facade has been repaired and completed. Looking ahead into FY22, Holliston has an exciting future. We can expect reports on those studies of sidewalks, water pipe replacement, and water sources this fall. The Marshall Street Solar Project is projected to be online in a year, generating clean energy and providing a significant increase in revenues to the town. The Governance Committee will have more recommendations for us to consider. The water treatment plant, as I mentioned, is expected to be online by next summer. And finally, the hope of normal that will find us again as we move out of the pandemic world that we've known for over a year. So again, on behalf of my colleagues, thank you for attending this annual town meeting. We look forward to hearing from all of you. Thank you again.
Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed, so voted. Article 2, to hear and act on the report of the Finance Committee. The motion is move that the annual report of the Finance Committee be received. Is there a second to the motion? The Chair of the Finance Committee, Mr. Shader, will provide a report regarding the town's overall financial condition. Mr. Shader?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Chris, you want to turn me down a little bit here? Okay. So one of the beauties, as for all the terribleness of the pandemic, the one thing I'll say that has benefited is they gave me my own mic, so I can actually watch my slides now while I'm talking. So, okay, so let's begin. Make sure I find out which button goes the right way here. Which one is it, Chris? Oh, there we go. There we go. Okay. So, when looking at FY22, our guiding principles were listed here, right? First thing is fund COVID expenses that were not covered elsewhere because, as you know, there were stimulus funds, there are more stimulus funds, there are funds dedicated to schools. There's still a lot of that to be worked out, but in the end of the day, we have to still fund all our expenses regardless of where these funding sources are coming from. We also want to get back on plan. As you can tell, as we all sit here, still distanced, still wearing masks, things have gotten better, but they're still not normal. So we tried our best to get back on plan, but recognizing that some expenses will need to continue. The goal, of course, is always to maintain level of service and then look at limited expansion as our revenue allows. Okay. So when you look at the revenue picture this year, Our net state aid is up slightly, about 1.75% from fiscal 21 in the preliminary cherry sheets that the state has given us. The budget, as always, the state budget is not final, won't be final till right before July 1st, more than likely. So these are all based on the best numbers we have available. Our local revenue we modeled is up 13% from fiscal 21, and that reflects two things. One is the kind of shift from the initial pandemic shutdowns to a new level of activity, but also based on monitoring of past revenues. And of course, as Mr. Cronin mentioned, we have the new solar project, and that contributed some more money to local revenue this year as well. Our total tax levy limit is up about 2.57%. And if you're wondering why I kind of emphasize that point, that's because you're going to see different numbers on the next slide, and that's because we have increases in the levy in FY22, but we also have that piece of the levy in FY21 that I mentioned back in December that we were not using. So this year we're using it all. Okay. So the actual levy change, of course, will depend on the final numbers, just to be clear. So when you factor that all together, you end up with about $2.2 million in available revenue. That's about 1.6 from the levy this year and from other revenues this year, and then about 560 or 570,000 from the levy limit we didn't use last year. How did we use that revenue? Well, we went to the departments, as we always do, and we did not set a guideline. We decided this year in consultation with the town administrator that what we would do is ask for level service budgets instead, because there's been a lot of controversy about the guideline, and I'll get to that in a little bit to explain how that was actually used, but this just makes it easier to understand. We asked for level service, but of course, when you look at our benefits cost, that's always a significant driver of expense increases on an annual basis. So our benefits costs were modeled as up 6.5%. And a lot of people I've heard recently say things like, oh, well, we never get a chance to ask for new things. And just to be clear, we do that every year as part of our guidance. We say, give us a level service budget, but tell us what you'd like to do, what your wish list is, and what your priorities are. And I figured I'd show this year exactly what we asked the departments to do. This was in an email that was sent out by the town administrator to all departments and boards saying, you know, break down, do us level service, but give us all your needs. If new levels are required, especially due to COVID, give us the documentation. So just to make it clear that the Finance Committee doesn't go to the departments and say, give us level service, and then we don't want to hear anything from you. We ask every year for this additional information. So any board that feels that they need the additional money don't always get it because there's a finite pie, but we ask for that information on an annual basis. Okay. So where did the money go this year in the budget that you're going to see in Article 18? Well, about $2 million of it goes to the school department. And that seems like a large number, but I want to put it in context. Last year, in FY21, the school budget barely changed because they responded to the pandemic situation we were in when we asked the departments to really keep their budgets clamped down. So it looks like it's a 5.7 or 5.9% increase this year, but that's really 2 years compounded into one. So it's about a 3% increase for 2 years. Okay? That includes, the other part of it was, of course, the $300,000 in benefit cost increases that I just mentioned, and we built in a 2% COLA for non-union employees. There were other changes here or there, but these were the primary drivers of that $2.2 million. And as you can see, it's not quite $2.2 million. So in Article 18, you see that reflected in the budget. It's a $68 million plus budget, so it's not tiny. And it's based on taxing at the levy limit. And this is another change in the way I present from last year, because a lot of people ask me, what does it mean when you say there's this much on the bottom line? That confuses people into thinking that it's a set figure, that we have like a profit and loss statement, and we say this is where our surplus ends up. That's not the case. This is all based on assumptions, and one of the assumptions is we're taxing at the levy limit. So to the extent that we don't do that, any money, little bits of money that are left over on the bottom become monies we don't raise via the property tax. So if you factor in what all this means, what it means is that your average taxes would go up about 3.3% in FY22. Okay? Now, methodologically, as I said before, every year we get together with the town's professionals, the town administrator, and all the people there. We discuss the revenue modeling for the coming year. We discuss estimated receipts. We discuss expense modeling, where we think health insurance is going, all those factors. And we prepare a budget model for the coming year. The guidance is sent by the town administrator, as I explained earlier, to all the boards and department heads who independently create their own department requests and then submit them with their additional needs. And then we review all the budgets, and with the TA, we develop the omnibus budget that you're seeing in Article 18 this year. Okay? So, one of the things I wanted to do this year was address several misconceptions that I've heard floating around over the last couple of months. Okay? The number one thing I've heard in all my years on the Finance Committee is everybody saying that everybody else gets treated better than them. Okay? Now, in my mind, that actually means we're doing a good job, because if everybody thinks they're not getting everything, then that means nobody's getting everything. So we review all budgets on their own merit, without prejudice, and we attempt to match the funding with the need. That inherently means that we have to seek the best value for our tax dollars. So when requests exceed the available funding, we obviously have to figure out how to partition up the pie, or how to recommend partitioning up the pie. And that's a very important point. We don't spend any money. We recommend to you how the town should spend their money. Okay? So these decisions are based on the information that are provided to us, as well as the town's priorities. And this gets back to things, we hear from residents, we hear from the town boards, we hear from the town administrator, and many different sources that influence how we decide how we're going to allocate the limited funds that we have. We have absolutely no financial interest in the outcome of the budget process. Our budget is only $1,500. It's a minuscule percentage of the $68 million. So we are approaching it from a non-prejudice perspective. And we are required to propose a balanced budget to town meeting. And I'll talk more about that later. But basically, it's important to remember that the balanced budget that we present and that is recommended to you is balanced based on parameters that are not yet final. And that's why frequently in October we make slight adjustments when the final numbers come in. But the basic principle is we don't want to recommend to you a budget that would result in us having to make cuts or other drastic actions, because once the fiscal year starts and money starts getting spent, then it becomes more painful to take money back. So you always want to plan your budgeting biased a little bit to make sure you're not going to get caught later in the year if the numbers don't come out where you think they're going to come out. Okay? Now, this, as proof that nobody gets treated specially, I went back and I looked at the data this year and said, okay, every department complains about everything. And I will point out, I'm not picking on these departments. These were just random departments that I felt were important for the town because they're public safety, there's select board, there's school committee, school department, things like that. But there are a couple of things I wanted to point out. One is, if you look at the top two lines, our net state aid has been going up at 1.8% per year since fiscal 11. Our Chapter 70 aid, which is aid for schools, has been going up at 1.9%. But the school department has gotten 3.1% on average every year from fiscal 11 to fiscal 22. Okay? Now, that may look low relative to the others, but I want to point out the school department is more than 55% of the budget, so it's by far the highest dollar allocation at that 3.1%. Okay? But if you look at other boards, the select board, the police department, council on aging, everybody's getting a piece of the pie. They don't all get it at once. In any given year, you may have to allocate the funding in different departments. There may be different needs that require different distributions. But at the end of the day, no department is really being mistreated, and no department has been on the guideline, which is why we moved away from that, okay? Because there was this misperception that budgets were being funded at 1 or 2% every year. That is not the case, okay? Now, the other thing that I want to point out is the finance budget has been down 0.5% over the last 11 years because we don't spend any money. And the OPEB contribution, which is another source of why aren't we doing anything with this money, that hasn't changed at all since we started funding the OPEB trust fund in fiscal 14. Not one dime of incremental revenue on an annual basis has been added to the OPEB funding. So that entire incremental revenue pie every year is not impacted by OPEB at all. Okay. So the other thing is that we hear about free cash because we talk about free cash in October. And everybody says, well, look, you have these big free cash numbers. You're being too conservative. Spend that on operations, right? Well, the reason we don't do that is because we follow best practices from the Department of Local Services that says under sound financial policies, you should strive to have between 3 and 5% free cash. And as a non-recurring revenue source, you basically shouldn't pay for it, use it for operations. You should use it for one-time expenditures, capital projects, or replenishing other reserves. And that's exactly what we do. And if you look at our latest numbers, which are from FY20, our free cash was 4% of omnibus. We're right where we're supposed to be from a best practices perspective. Okay. The other thing I hear a lot is we're too conservative because we're not spending all that money. Well, I want to talk a little bit about long-term obligations, right? We know that neglecting those long-term obligations has greater financial impact down the road. Everybody here is paying a $300 infrastructure fee on their water bill because for many years we weren't planning for the replacement of the pipes. Okay? Now, $300 may not sound like a lot, but it is a lot when the bills used to be $25, $30, $40, and now they're over $100 every quarter. Okay? Well, the reason for that is because we fell so far behind. So when we fund things like OPEB, and we fund things like our pension liability, which is one thing we're going to start working on this year. We've been working on that for a while, but you'll see that in a future article. That helps everyone. Why does that help everyone? Because it helps us as taxpayers avoid the financial shock of having to pay for these benefits when the bill comes due. And it's a big bill. The longer you let it go, the bigger the bill becomes. Okay? But it's also good for our town employees. Why? Because the town employees can go to work knowing that the benefits they are earning today will be there when they retire. That we are taking responsibility for the commitments we made when we offer these benefit packages to provide funding for them when the people become eligible for them. So it's not that we're taking money away from anybody else. It's that we're living up to the obligations and the expectations that both the taxpayers and the employees should have for how the town should behave financially. Okay? Now, of course, we do support well-researched proposals. You heard a lot of Mr. Cronin's examples of what's been going on in FY21, the town hall doors, the floors, other capital projects, the sustainability coordinator, studies, all these things. We do support growing the operational budget when we have the money and supporting capital requests when we have the money. That's what we've always done. Okay? So the other thing I want to remind everybody is when I say we support that, I'm saying the Finance Committee makes a recommendation. And just to be clear, as I've said many times, and I don't know if everybody follows this, but you are the legislating authority of the town. You have the power of the purse. Not the Finance Committee, not the Select Board, none of the town boards do. Ultimately, appropriations are up to you. So the recommendations we make to you are our best judgment as to how we should spend the town's funds. Okay, so now, what does this mean from an article perspective? You heard Mr. Cronin reference several of the articles. I'll just talk about some of the financial ones of note. As you know, we did the routine annual approvals on the consent agenda, so I'll skip that one. The one thing that was in there that was not in a prior year was that we added an exemption this year for Gold Star families, which I think applies to literally one household in town. Okay. Article 4, which we'll get to shortly, sets compensation for elected officials. And just to be clear, we had a discussion last July about stipends. The stipend committee issued a report. The result of that report doesn't impact FY22, but it would impact FY23 and beyond. So they recommended the phase out, and from the Finance Committee's perspective, we've asked the Select Board to weigh in, and we'll obviously listen to their opinion, but the plan is right now, without any guidance, we will implement the report. Article 5 will update the personnel bylaw. It's relatively routine, but I always try to point out the changes so that people don't have to compare one year to the next. The hourly rates are increased 2%. That's the 2% COLA I referenced earlier. There were some adjustments to managerial grades and titles, and there was an increase in stipends, shift differentials for ambulance and EMS because there was a discussion with the Select Board, with the Emergency Management Director about adjusting those stipends. So we recommended that in the budget. And of course, as Mr. Cronin already mentioned, Articles 24 and 25 create some revolving funds for green initiatives. The omnibus budget that will be presented to you, and it's presented in Article 18, reflects all our recommendations, as it always does. It maintains our OPEB funding per our policies, and it also results in an approximately 3.3% tax increase, again, final number TBD, based on how the numbers work out. In Article 19, we are asking that we put $1.75 million into the capital expenditure fund. That's this level funded with what we did in FY20. Last year, we cut that back, and now, as I said, trying to return back to normal funding. And in Article 20, where we spend some of that capital money, we're recommending that the town expend about $432,000 on, there's a whole list of what I would call relatively small dollar, nothing major in it by itself in there. And of course, most capital will be dealt with in October. Now, Article 23 will establish a pension stabilization fund. That is the last major long-term obligation the town needs to address. Now, establishing the fund doesn't mean we're putting money into it right away, and the only funding that's going in or being recommended to go in at this town meeting is about $43,000 that represents essentially a prepaid discount we get with the Middlesex County retirement system. So that's not new money, that's money that was already appropriated for our pension contribution, and that's kind of a bonus that we get, so we're going to put that as the seed money in the stabilization fund. In the future town meetings, we'll address getting more funding in there as funding becomes available. Okay, so finally, hopefully we're past the worst of this pandemic. Obviously we're not, because we're all sitting here with masks and distanced, but as was said before, more people are getting vaccinated, and hopefully by the time we get to our next town meeting, we don't have to spread out and we can stand here and get back to normal. COVID mitigation costs are still impacting the town. I don't want to portray it as though everything just went back to the way it was pre-COVID, right? There are still cleaning expenses, there are still expenses associated with implementing distance protocols and things like that that the town is bearing. Now, we do have the massive federal spending, and everybody knows about that, but there's a big risk there, and the risk is Prop 2.5. Prop 2.5 limits our tax increases, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but because it's not tied to inflation, if massive spending starts to lead to increased inflation, that will very quickly put pressure on the budgets, because we will no longer have the ability to raise revenue on an annual basis that overcomes the impact of inflation. We've had very low inflation for a long time, and that's allowed us to kind of use Prop 2.5 to stay even. But if inflation starts spiking up to 3-4%, then Prop 2.5 is going to have a significantly limiting impact, limiting on our ability to fund things. Okay. So the budget you see in Article 18 is what I would say more normal, not completely normal. It unwinds the defensive posture we had last year. We're not asking to put a bunch of money in reserves this year. We're not asking, budgets are more normal growth, back on track. Okay? And it restores most of the funding that was delayed from last year. As I said, the schools being a good example, where we delayed some funding and we're putting it back this year. So in summary, we've seemed to have weathered the storm, which is great for everybody. While we still have problems, we still have issues to deal with, right? We've gotten through what I hope is the worst of it, and what the Finance Committee hopes is the worst of it. And we're hopeful that things will improve, as I said, with the one little asterisk that we've got to keep an eye on the impact of the stimulus to make sure that inflation doesn't turn out to be the next thing we have to deal with. But that's where we are right now, and I hope you'll support our recommendations in Article 18, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Ken. Any further discussion? And then all those in favor of the motion say aye. All those opposed? So voted. Article 3 was dealt with by the consent agenda, so we'll move to Article 4. Compensation for elected officials. The article is to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate a transfer from available funds for the purpose of fixing the salaries and compensation of all elected officers of the town effective July 1, 2021, which salaries and compensation are printed below. Board of Assessors, 3 members, FY 2021, $7,500, FY 2022, the same amount. Select Board, 3 members, $175, the same in 2022. Town Clerk salary, $77,917 for FY 2021 and $79,475, or take any action relative thereto. The Select Board offers the following comments. Based on the advice from the Massachusetts Department of Revenue, town meeting must approve the annual compensation for all elected officials. A stipend committee was created following the 2020 annual town meeting and issued a report recommending a future use of stipends that would affect future budget cycles, starting as early as 2023, as shown on Exhibit A. The FinCom recommend favorable action as the first step in implementing the stipend committee recommendation. The motion is moved that this article be approved as presented in the warrant and that the stipend committee's recommendations as shown as Exhibit A of the warrant be accepted. Is there a second to the motion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed? So voted. Thank you to the stipend committee for doing their work. Article 5, unpaid bills of a prior year. The article is to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate a transfer from available funds the sum of money for unpaid bills from prior years or take any action relative thereto. We're seeking approval of the following bills. The vendor is Mead, Talaman, and Costa for fiscal year 2020 in the amount of $111.31. Sponsored services incurred by the Select Board. The same firm, 2020, the amount of $74.47. The motion is moved that the town appropriate $185.78 from the reserve fund for the stated purpose of the article. Bills from a prior fiscal year after a reasonable amount of time cannot be paid without town meeting approvals. These bills were overlooked in the transition of staff changes. Don't draw any adverse inference about Mr. Talaman that he has to come here hat in hand seeking $185 from this evening. The funds were well earned. Is there any discussion with respect to the article? If not, then all those in favor say aye. Those opposed? So voted. That requires a 4/5 vote, but the vote was unanimous, so we'll proceed. Article 6, current fiscal year transfers. The article is to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate a transfer from available funds a sum of money for the purpose of supplementing various accounts of the town's fiscal year 2021 annual operating budget, previously voted by the town under Article 11 of the warrant for the July 20, 2020 annual town meeting and under Article 1 of the warrant for the December 5, 2020 special town meeting, or take any action relative thereto. The requested appropriation is for snow and ice, the amount of $138,100 to be sourced from the reserve fund, and for the water department, $55,000 from the water retained earnings. The offered explanation is that occasionally there are unforeseen budget expenses that require an additional appropriation. In FY 2021, the omnibus budget reflected a $600,000 reserve fund lineup, up from the standard $315,000 in recognition of the unknowns that came with COVID-19. And at the December 2020 special town meeting, this was increased in a supplemental appropriation of an additional $190,000. At this time, snow and ice is the only known need of the reserve fund. Water additional costs were based on incorrect salary assumptions for 2021 and will be covered by water retained earnings. The FinCom recommended the town appropriate $138,000 from the reserve fund for snow and ice and $55,000 from the water retained earnings for the stated purpose, and their recommendation was unanimous. The motion is moved that the town appropriate $138,100 from the reserve fund for snow and ice and $55,000 from the water retained earnings for the purpose stated in the article. Is there a second? Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed? So voted. Article 7 is to amend to Consolidated Personnel Bylaw, Section 29, Job and Wage Classification Plan, sponsored by the town manager. The article is to strike that, town administrator, excuse me, back in time, to see if the town will vote to amend the Consolidated Personnel Bylaw, Section 29, Job and Wage Classification Plan by reflecting those revisions, deletions, or additions to be effective as of July 21, or take any action relative thereto. The suggested motion is strike that. The explanation is as follows. The personnel bylaw is updated annually, and was last amended at December 2020 special town meeting. This article updates the cost of living adjustment for non-union personnel, creates an assistant town administrator / HR director position, and adds shift differential to the table for ambulance-EMT rates, among other housekeeping changes. You heard Mr. Shader offer the comments of the FinCom with respect to this article, and it's noted here that the FinCom recommends unanimous favorable action on this article. The motion is moved that the article be approved as presented in the warrant. Is there a second? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, so voted. Article 8, amend the Consolidated Personnel Bylaw, to see if the town will vote to amend the Consolidated Personnel Bylaw by including a new article, Section 30, as follows. Employees shall cease accruing paid time off in the event they are absent from work for 2 consecutive calendar months Accrual of paid time off shall cease any time an employee is in an unpaid status. To see if the town will vote to amend the consolidated personnel bylaw for sections 8, 10, and 23 from a 90-day probationary period to a 6-month probationary period, or take any action relative thereto. It's moved that this article be approved as presented in the warrant. Is there a second? This article received the unanimous favorable recommendation from the Finance Committee, and the changes are suggested to town meeting at the recommendation of Labor Council. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed? So voted. We move now to Article 9, sponsored by Mr. Tyler. The article is to amend the general bylaw Article XLVI, amend Article IV, not intravenous, but IV, and delete XXXIII, sponsored by the Governance Committee. The article is to see if the town will vote to amend its general bylaws by 1, adding a new article, XLVI, entitled Fiscal Procedures, and 2, amending Article IV, entitled Finance Committee, and 3, deleting Article XXIII, entitled Capital Improvement Program. All is shown on Exhibit B attached to the warrant. The motion is move that this article be approved as presented in Exhibit B of the warrant document, with strike-through used to indicate the removal of language from existing bylaws and to indicate new language. Is there a second to the motion? Now, the Governance Committee has requested to make a presentation, and I'll call on the Governance Committee. In order to just address in advance what the format will be, I understand that the Governance Committee, 1, 2, or 3 members will participate in making a presentation to town meeting. I'm then going to recognize Mr. Shader or his designee with respect to the position of the Finance Committee, and then I'll move to general comments from the public on the topic.
Didn't say and bold type.
Oh, excuse me. And let me correct the motion. Let me read it again because I neglected to include, I skipped over 2 words that should be. So the motion is move that this article be approved as presented in Exhibit B of the warrant document, with strike-through used to indicate the removal of language from existing bylaws and bold type to indicate new language. That's the motion. Is there a second to that motion? Thank you. We'll move then to the Governance Committee. Who would like to speak or would like to be recognized on behalf of the Governance Committee? Mr. Engel? Thank you.
Len Engel, 660 Winter Street. Good evening, everyone.
I'm sorry, Mr. Engel, before you start, I will say that our town meeting rules generally limit speakers to 15 minutes. Subject to my discretion. I'm not going to hold Mr. Engel, and I'm not going to hold subsequent speakers on that topic, and I'm certainly not going to hold Mr. Shader to that, so I don't want you to feel under the pressure of 15 minutes to make whatever explanation you need to make, and same for Mr. Shader, okay? Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
No problem. Thank you.
Yep.
I'm going to make a brief presentation on the Governance Committee and the process that led us to this point, and then I'll turn it over to my colleague, Sat McKechnie, to touch on a couple key points of the 2 articles. We're going to present tonight on Article 9 and 10 in this presentation. Obviously, we'll take up Article 10 after this. So the Governance Committee was established last March by the Select Board to review Holliston's governance structure and recommend improvements, something that has not been undertaken for more than 40 years in Holliston. The 5 current members all volunteered for this position with no preconditions. The group collectively has over 100 years of municipal experience, and the committee has total discretion choosing the issues it wishes to address. Holliston is not a small town. Its operating budget is $64.3 million with nearly 800 town employees. Municipal government has become far more complicated over the past few decades, requiring greater expertise and efficiencies. Such growth has led towns similar to Holliston to modernize their town management, relying on trained professionals in addition to their elected and appointed town volunteers. This led the Governance Committee to focus on one of the most important responsibilities in municipal government, the development of the operating and capital budgets for town meeting. So why a bylaw recommendation? We looked at other towns and found they have far more comprehensive and clear bylaws and charters describing the budget development process and responsibilities. This lack of guidance in our bylaws has led to questions about who does what and when. The Governance Committee also focused on Holliston's full-time financial team that have little responsibility in the bylaws during the budget development process. We decided that Holliston needed a comprehensive bylaw that took advantage of the skills of the professional town staff, required collaboration across boards, committees, and departments, and ensured an independent review by the Finance Committee. Articles 9 and 10 are the products of that work. So it led to this recommendation. To understand the needs of the town, the Governance Committee conducted an extensive examination of the budget processes of towns throughout the Commonwealth and took a deeper dive into 15 towns with characteristics similar to Holliston. We held 28 meetings, many with Holliston officials and boards to understand the process and the challenges they have, and we held 2 public hearings. The result was the development of proposals that were further improved based on the feedback from these meetings, with especially helpful recommendations from the town treasurer, town administrator, tax collector, and finance committee. Because of the importance of the Finance Committee in the budget development process, we sought to understand not only its statutory authority, but also how the Massachusetts Association of Town Finance Committees view FinCom's role. It became clear that the responsibilities associated with developing the budget guidelines, and the budget should be an executive function. In most cases, that's the select board or the town administrator, and the vital roles of reviewing, analyzing, and making recommendations to town meeting are conducted by the independent and objective Finance Committee. The association states, and I quote, "It is not advisable for the Finance Committee to take on the budget-making role directly. Such a role usurps some of the powers and responsibilities of elected officials and their appointees, and compromises the committee's primary statutory role as objective observer to town meeting." As with much of Holliston governance, there's a history that's relevant here. As many of you know, the previous town administrator was not significantly engaged in the budget development process. As a result, the Finance Committee stepped up and became more involved in that process. However, this increased involvement has, in the Governance Committee's opinion, compromised FinCom's role as an objective advisor to town meeting. It's not possible under the current process for the Finance Committee to create the budget guidance for town departments and boards, develop the operating budget, submit the budget, and then provide objective analysis and independent recommendations on the budget to town meeting. I'll now turn it over to Scott to briefly review the articles.
The right arrow, thanks. Scott McKechnie, 215 Dalton Road. So the fundamental change, so the fundamental change in the proposed budget development process is one that requires the town administrator to manage the budget development process, to also establish the budget calendar, the guidelines, and prepare the budget message. The town administrator will also compile the comprehensive preliminary operating budget and capital budget for the select board, and then submit the preliminary or draft operating and capital budget to the Finance Committee. The process starts with a finance summit at the beginning of the process in early November to set the parameters of the town and the capital budget development. This process ensures the independence of the school committee and the independently elected boards in developing the budgets that are submitted to the Finance Committee. I thought I'd point out who would be on the Finance Summit. It would be the Select Board Chair, the FinCom Chair, the School Committee Chair or that person's designee, the Town Administrator, the Superintendent of Schools, and the School Finance Officer. After the Town Administrator has worked with all the departments, the Select Board will receive the proposed comprehensive operating budget from the Town Administrator approximately 110 days prior to the town meeting. Within 30 days, the Select Board shall adopt the budgets under its jurisdiction, and the Town Administrator will then submit the Select Board's budget, along with the budgets of the other independently elected boards, to the Finance Committee for their review. The budget to be acted on by the town meeting shall be the comprehensive budget compiled by the Town Administrator, adopted by the Select Board, with the recommendations of the Finance Committee. The Finance Committee, will have 80 days to conduct its independent review of the budget and the other financial articles. The Finance Committee will meets with the town officials, the boards, and other committees and request information as needed. Finance Committee will meet with the Select Board prior to town meeting to go over said recommendations. This process ensures transparency through public hearings held by the Select Board and the Finance Committee throughout the process, and gives clear outline of the various responsibilities in the process in a bylaw. The bylaw establishes a new capital planning committee to develop a rolling 5-year capital improvement program, which will be submitted to the Town Administrator. It authorizes, before I go there, the eight-person committee will consist of 5 voting members and 3 non-voting members. It authorizes the Town Administrator to coordinate with the Select Board, the Finance Committee, and the independently elected boards to address capital needs. The Town Administrator will submit the capital program to the Select Board to adopt before sending it to the Finance Committee for its review. So Article 10, there are a few amendments, and they consist primarily of moving the spring town meeting to the second Monday in May, which will give more time for budget development, and will primarily handle the matters involved in the expenditures of town funds. Capital budgets will be addressed at both the spring and the fall town meeting. And it also clarifies the language that the fall town meeting will be held on the 3rd Monday in October. What I meant to say clarifies there were a few typos that had to be corrected as well. It also states that the special town meetings may be set by the Select Board at such time as they deem necessary, as long as there's 14 days' notice. It also authorizes the town meeting notice to be posted on the town website along with the warrant. Article 10 also includes some legislative special acts to the list of authorities to which the Select Board must comply in making appointments, such as acknowledges the Town Administrator's role in the appointment of certain officials, such as police and fire chiefs and highway superintendent. And it also requires the Select Board to organize and manage a much-needed electronic talent bank site to provide information to the residents about opportunities to serve Holliston. Now that I've completed the overviews, I'd just like to share a few of our additional findings. Namely, I'd like to point out that 33 years ago, which was the last time that the Division of Local Services reviewed Holliston's governance, the findings were that Holliston's financial organization is substantially decentralized, which hinders the comprehensive financial planning. The DLS was very clear, states that Holliston should broaden the financial management responsibilities of the executive secretary, which we now call the town administrator. Vest full responsibility in the position for the coordination of the annual budget and the development of the recommended annual budget for all town activities. Clearly states the Finance Committee's role in the budget process should be redefined from one of preparation, review, and recommendation to one of review and recommendation. We also looked at the handbook of the Massachusetts Association of Town Finance Committees. It clearly states the executive branch of the town government should be responsible for issuing the budget guidelines, preparing the budget requests, and assembling a comprehensive budget review. The Finance Committee should review and analyze the budget and make recommendations to town. It clearly cautions the Finance Committee's direct involvement in budget making would compromise its primary statutory role as an objective advisor to the town. The planning and development of the budget continues to be stressed by the DLS as an executive responsibility. So in summary, the bylaw proposal develops a clear, comprehensive, and transparent budget development process, uses Holliston's experienced, full-time professional finance staff to develop the operating and capital budget proposals, ensures checks and balances with the Finance Committee's role in reviewing and making independent recommendations to town meeting. It also establishes a capital planning committee that develops a rolling 5-year plan. And most importantly, it provides for public input throughout the budget process. This chart is a summary of the 15 comparable towns and how they manage the budget development process. The bond rating on the right is not intended to show any direct correlation, strictly there for informational purposes, where Holliston sits at a AA+ rating, and the 15 comparable towns that we looked at, 6 of them were AAA rated, 5 of them were similar to Holliston, and 3 of them were lower than Holliston, strictly informational purposes. But what this chart shows is that on the first column, the budget is presented by, on the 15 towns, 7 of them is the select board, 6 is the town administrator, 2 is the finance committee. Who prepares the budget calendar? 5 select board, 9 town administrator, none for the finance committee. Budget guidelines, who sets the budget guidelines? Select board 6, town administrator or town manager 8, finance committee 1. Who prepares the operating budget? I guess I can lump that together with the capital budget because it's 15 for the town administrator and town manager, none for select board, none for the finance committee. So with that, Mr. Moderator, I would like to invite Sam Tyler up to finish the presentation.
Okay, yes, please. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Tyler.
Sam Tyler, 353 Chamberlain Street. My role is a result of a key member of our committee not being able to be here. Paul LeBeau, who's a former town administrator, is out of state for a family event, and he did leave a statement, and so what I'm going to do is just read the statement. The Fiscal Procedures General Bylaw proposal offered in Article 9 by the Governance Committee, of which I am a member, presents an opportunity for the town to delineate and clarify an important basic governmental task, the development of the annual spending plan in a manner that incorporates best practices successfully used in scores of towns throughout the Commonwealth. The proposal is also consistent with recommendations from the Massachusetts Department of Revenue to the town of Holliston in 1988, 33 years ago, conforms to the current practice of the Massachusetts Association of Town Finance Committees, and builds on the provisions of the 1994 Special Act creating the position of town administrator that was approved by town meeting. The proposed bylaw takes full advantage of the professional financial team working for the town while preserving the Finance Committee's critical independent advisory role. The town administrator, working with the treasurer collector, the town accountant, and principal assessor, would shepherd a spending plan through the process that includes the select board, the school committee, the finance committee, and town meeting. Elected boards, committees, commissions, and officials will retain control over their respective budget proposals as submitted to the finance committee. The town administrator will consult with the finance committee on key aspects of the process, such as guidelines, policies, and scheduling. The finance committee will continue to act as the financial advisor to town meeting by reporting its recommendations to town meeting. The fiscal procedures bylaw would create a budget development roadmap for now and for the future. The proposal offers the town a chance to clear up any ambiguity or doubt regarding budgeting and define a budgeting process that is sustainable. The roles of all players will be clearly defined, providing transparency, accountability, and cooperation through joint meetings, consultation, and public hearings on a spending plan that would be publicly available throughout the process. I wish that I could be at town meeting to raise my hand in support of Articles 9 and 10, but a family event prevents that. And anybody that knows Paul will appreciate this next sentence. The option to make town meeting a second priority in my life is a new luxury after 33 years to the contrary. And for anybody that is not familiar with Paul, he served in Holliston as sort of the chief administrative official for 32 years. First as administrative assistant from 1983 to 87, Holliston executive secretary from 87 to 94, and town administrator from 1994 to 2015. So we're delighted to have him on the committee and be supportive of Article 9 and 10, and thank you for letting me read the statement.
Okay, you're welcome. Anybody else speaking on members of the committee? Mr. Engel, is that your presentation? Okay, thank you. I'm now going to, before I call on, I'm going to call on Mr. Shader. I want town meeting to be aware that Mr. Shader asked my permission to incorporate a slide presentation into his presentation this evening. I'm not sure that he had to ask my permission to do that, but he did so, and I consider that to be a gracious move on his behalf. I was very happy to accommodate that request, and so Mr. Shader, with my okay, is going to include some slides as part of his presentation on the article tonight. Mr. Shader, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
You're welcome.
Very good. Sounds kind of funny saying Mr. Mayor, but
No, that's all right.
especially when we're talking about governance.
Call me anything but late
Okay.
for dinner.
So, as many of you know, the Finance Committee has not supported the changes in Article 9. I'll start by saying that we're not opposed to everything that's in there, but we think there are some significant flaws that make it unworkable at this particular time, and I wanted to address some of that. First of all, I wanted to clarify one thing that I just heard in the presentation, which was preparing budgets. I think there's a lot of confusion about what the Finance Committee actually does in that regard. We don't prepare individual budgets. We don't go to any department and say, this is your budget. We gather the requests from the individual departments. So we're not, in a sense, the preparation of the budget we do is to assemble all those requests and put it into a comprehensive spending plan. So I think it's very important to understand the distinction between the two, because the implication was, and I totally agree with, the fact that the Finance Committee's independence would be compromised if we made budgets for every department. No. Okay, well, that's up to Chris. So Okay, so let me start. Okay. The Finance Committee feels that this proposal will significantly weaken financial oversight, and I'll get to why in a couple of slides. Because it transfers most authority to the Select Board, including budget review, preparation, and presentation to town meeting. The result will not improve our governance. It will actually result in restrict financial checks and balances, and will transfer budget authority to the Select Board, not the town administrator. Okay, if the article passes, the Select Board would approve and present the operating and capital program budgets to town meeting. That's in Section 3, Section 5, and Section 6.1. The FinCom would no longer be required to review department budgets, as is done now, or be able to independently review and approve the revenue models, or determine the budget preparation guidelines, and you heard that from the Governance Committee. That's in Section 2.1 and Section 2.6. Perhaps one of the biggest subtleties in these bylaws is that the FinCom would no longer have access to all town information relevant to financial decisions, which is codified in our bylaws today. We'll be limited to public information, and that's under Section 4.1 of the bylaw proposal that restricts us to information not subject to the, with the exceptions of the Mass Public Records Law, which basically means we can get public information only. The Select Board would be required to ask us for a recommendation, but would be free to ignore that, because all it's required is consultation. That's in Section 5. Okay? And the Finance Committee's role at town meeting, instead of presenting the spending plan that is put before you for consideration, would be reduced to being first in line to offer amendments, thereby making the, if your desire is to approve a recommended budget from the Finance Committee, it would turn town meeting into a very lengthy process because we'd have to amend every budget. That's in Section 5. But the biggest concern that we had was that the second largest spenders in town would be preparing the town spending plan that gets presented to you. In the FinCom recommended budget that you're going to see in Article 18, the school committee spends $37 million, or about 56%. The Select Board spends about $26 million, 35%, and controls 30 of the 43 departmental budgets that are presented to you for approval. The Finance Committee spends $1,525, and that's for basically membership in the Mass Association of Finance Committees and to pay the person who takes our minutes, which we haven't even used in several years. The Select Board also appoints committees, like the Governance Committee, can sit on other committees, like the Traffic Advisory Committee, and some of those committees get taxpayer funds. Right now, in our current bylaws, Finance Committee members are prohibited from serving on any other boards or committees, specifically to maintain the independence of the Finance Committee. We would be codifying an inherent conflict of interest into our bylaws. So the Governance Committee has said, this is giving the town administrator more authority over the process, not the Select Board. However, the TA reports to the Select Board. The Finance Committee is elected by you and reports only to you. Now, why is this a problem? Because our town administrator is governed by the special act that was passed in 1994. And right in there it says, the town administrator shall be responsible for the implementation of all policies, directives, and votes of the Board of Selectmen. The Select Board hires, evaluates, develops the contract, and signs the contract of the town administrator. So you tell me, are you independent from your boss? Okay. In a recent Governance Committee meeting from last week, right, okay, one of the members of the Governance Committee made this statement. We came into this process assuming good faith across the board. We assumed good faith with the town administrator. We assumed good faith with the Select Board. We assumed good faith with the Finance Committee. Okay? That is exactly the wrong way to draft your bylaws. As I say in the financial industry, Trust is not an internal control. Now, according to DLS, there is no one best practice for how you structure yourself that applies to every town. The governance committee did not look at financial outcomes in those 15 communities to determine best practices. They spoke only to the town administrators, not elected officials or others in the town government. 5 of the 15 towns they used have had embezzlement scandals in recent memory. And 14 of the 15 towns have 5-member select boards. With regard to financial policy, not structure, the Finance Committee has been using DLS best practices for a very long time, as I mentioned in the financial overview. There are also technical irregularities in the proposal as written. The bylaws are in direct conflict with the TA Special Act. Okay? For example, and I just pointed out 2 simple technical differences here. The budget format, the TA Act, and by the way, just to be clear, the Town Administrator Special Act cannot be changed by bylaw. It is the law. Okay? He shall prepare a uniform budget document in a format which is acceptable to the Finance Committee. But in this bylaw, section 2.5, it says, it shall be in the form as the Town Administrator deems appropriate after consultation with the Finance Committee and the Select Board. On the timeline, the Town Administrator Special Act says, he shall compile within a time fixed by agreement between the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee. But the bylaw, section 2.1, says the Town Administrator, after consultation with the Select Board and Finance Committee, shall no later than November 15th set completion dates for all phases of the succeeding fiscal year's operating and capital development process. But I've also heard several statements that have really bothered me personally and have bothered the committee. This is about increasing transparency. As an elected board, the Finance Committee is subject to all of the open meeting laws. All deliberations on the budgets, including the model development, reviews, recommendations, conducted by the Finance Committee are conducted in open public meetings. All budget reviews are public meetings, and they're all posted in advance with the budgets we're reviewing. All budget recommendations we make are voted at public meetings. The town administrator has no such obligation and is not subject to the open meeting law. This is about good governance. What it's really about is reducing oversight and increasing select board budget authority without proper review. As I said, under our current statute, our town administrator law, the town administrator reports to the select board. And I will point out that when we met with the governance committee, we pointed this out to them and said, if you change the bylaw, the special act, to point out that on budget matters, the TA is independent and works only with the finance committee, then maybe you've got something there, okay? But right now, handing power to the town administrator is handing power to the select board. And it's not about power. I'm talking about budget authority and who's controlling the spending. Okay? We heard a minute ago that Holliston needs to use our professional staff. When we didn't have a town administrator who was capable, they said the finance committee stepped in. We did. You know that. You've seen me present here for many years. The way we stepped in was we filled the role of the town administrator on financial matters, to put it bluntly. That's a succinct way of saying it. It doesn't mean that we did not use the town's professionals. What it means that is instead of going to our town administrator and saying, can you get us these numbers or can you give us your input, I went directly to the town professionals. I sat with our treasurer. I sat with our town accountant. I sat with our assessor. All I did was do the work that the town administrator at the time was not willing to do. So the implication that the professional staff is not being used is not correct. The budget you will consider in Article 18 was developed with the town administrator at every single one of our meetings, doing all the research that we needed to be done, handing us every report we needed to be handed. It was not like the Finance Committee did not take advantage of the professionals that were there. In addition, members of the Finance Committee are financial professionals as well. And in addition to that, at many of the Governance Committee, I've heard it at least 3 times, the Governance Committee has made it pretty clear. The Finance Committee has been doing a good job. At the beginning of the presentation, I heard this line, and I heard it again. I saw this earlier. I heard it again tonight. The Finance Committee will still present a budget. That is just flat out not true in the proposed bylaw. In Section 3, it says, and you should all have it in front of you, the budget to be acted upon by town meeting shall be the budget approved by the Select Board. The Select Board shall be responsible for submitting the proposed operating budget to town meeting. And in Section 5, the Select Board will adopt a proposed budget for the ensuing year to present to town meeting. Okay? Finance Committee recommendations are not a recommended budget. The bylaw is extremely clear that the budget you will be receiving to consider and act upon at town meeting will be coming from the Select Board that has its own significant self-interest in that budget. Okay? I also heard somebody say the Finance Committee will have limited access to all information, or will still have access to everything. Well, look at Section 4.1, as I referenced earlier. The Finance Committee may request the town administrator or any other town official or agency to furnish it with such additional information as it may deem necessary or appropriate, subject to any applicable exceptions defined in the so-called Mass Public Records Law. So we do not have the same information access that we currently have and would not have under this bylaw. It basically limits the Finance Committee to only public records and is basically the equivalent of telling an auditor that they only get to see the financial records you choose to show to them. We've heard this also earlier. Holliston's bylaws are largely silent on the development and responsibilities of the budget process. The bylaws mesh with state law and are silent because state law sets out the model. And I'll talk more about this in a little bit. I've also heard this takes us back to where we were when Paul was the TA. Well, I'll just remind everybody that when Paul was the TA, and Paul did do a great job, the current bylaws were in place during his entire tenure as town administrator. And with the current TA, we're using the exact same process. I'm pleased as punch that we have a capable town administrator because that makes my life easier. Okay. The 1994 TA law, is another thing I heard, authorizes the TA to compile the budget. With this authority in place, the next logical step is to give the town administrator and select board budget authority. First of all, notice that it said town administrator and select board, not town administrator. Now, I'm pointing out that this was addressed in 1994 because we just heard it hadn't been looked at since 1988, and we've also heard that Reagan was president, and so I'm just reminding everybody in 1994, Bill Clinton was president. Okay. The 1994, Holliston did have a government study committee that looked at this. Budget roles were laid out in that report, which explained the TA statute and our bylaws. And this is what it said. Budget compilation responsibilities would enable the Finance Committee to focus on fiscal analysis, budget review, and recommendations. The town administrator would be responsible for the preparation of the annual operating budget for all town departments under the jurisdiction of the Board of Selectmen. Nobody's disputing that. We don't make budgets, as I said before. We don't make individual department budgets. The town administrator handles that responsibility for those 30 budgets that the Select Board controls. Okay? We've also heard this statement. The town administrator would compile the annual operating budget and the annual capital improvements program based on information provided by each department and agency. The role of compiling a budget is a ministerial function to assist the Board of Selectmen and Finance Committee in their respective policy roles. And I underline policy roles because statements have been made that the Finance Committee has no role in setting policy, but that was made clear in 1994. Now, the word compile was actually highlighted in the report and was defined as you see there. Recently, we've heard that that was ambiguous, that that nobody knows what compile really meant. The 1994 Government Study Committee made it clear it was a ministerial function. Okay? And just to prove it, I pulled out the 1994 report to show you exactly what I just wrote, how it's bolded there, compile the annual operating budget, and there's the link to it if you want to go see it yourself. The chair of that Government Study Committee was Mr. Tyler, who was chair of the current Governance Committee. So this clearly shows that the FinCom had an intended policy role. The existing bylaws comprehend the roles set out by state law and our existing TA statute that cannot be changed by the bylaws we're considering tonight. The Finance Committee provides oversight on all financial matters and develops the budget that is presented to town meeting for approval. Let's talk about some real facts. Comparatively speaking, Holliston is doing better than our peers on almost every financial metric. Our OPEB funding is on plan, even with rising liability and changes to life expectancy. We're in the top 4% of the Commonwealth. And as I said, that benefits the taxpayers and it benefits our employees who know and can go to sleep at night, unlike almost every other community in this state and in this country, knowing that the benefits they're earning will be there when they need them. That was funded entirely with non-operating money, just for the record. Holliston has not had to lay off an employee for financial reasons for many years. And our bond rating has increased 2 levels in the last decade. This has all been accomplished while the overall omnibus has been increasing at about 2.8% annually over a 12-year period. So what does S&P say? And this is February 2020, and I highlight that only to point out that that's prior to our current town administrator. This is when we had effectively a non-financial town administrator. We view the town's management as strong, with good financial policies and practices under our FMA methodology. Holliston's budgetary performance is strong, in our opinion. The stable outlook reflects our views of Holliston's overall strong financial practices and policies, which contribute to generally strong and predictable budgetary performance. Now, you also heard them cite from what I call the MMA, which is the same Finance Committee handbook. But I wanted to point out some other things that handbook says. Okay? In effect, the local Finance Committee has the same role as the House Ways and Means Committee. It is the Finance Committee's responsibility to receive the budgets from the executive branch, analyze them, have hearings where department heads and the public can testify, which is what we do, and present a balanced budget to town meeting. That budget should reflect the Finance Committee's decisions based upon their best judgments of the issues and finances of the town. That is exactly what we do right now under our current bylaws. Furthermore, in that handbook, it says, according to Mass General Law, Chapter 39, Section 16, unless no Finance Committee exists or a bylaw or charter of the town specifically authorizes the selectmen to submit the budget shall be submitted by the Finance Committee. So this idea that because we don't have a budget development bylaw that there's ambiguity here is not correct. One of the things that they point out in that handbook is Finance Committee members should read these laws very carefully and be vigilant of attempts to bypass their critical function. That's one reason why I'm standing here talking to you right now. The Secretary of State's Citizens Guide to Town Meetings. What does the Finance Committee do? The Finance Committee prepares the budget in the months before the annual town meeting starts. Okay? It also prepares financial articles, which are agenda items. There is no ambiguity about what a Finance Committee is supposed to do. Finally, I'd like to point this out, which again is from the Department of Revenue. And they said, a board of selectmen in a town with an elected or appointed finance committee has no statutory role in the preparation and submission of the annual budget unless it is expressly given a role by bylaw. If not, the finance committee is responsible for preparing, submitting, and distributing the budget under Mass General Laws, Chapter 39, Section 16, and Chapters 41, Section 59 and 60. There is no ambiguity as to what our role is. The fact of the matter is, Holliston is performing better than our peers. The governance committee presented no data that its proposal produces better outcomes or that other towns have done better. And in fact, I could argue that they've done worse. And when I hear that we compare ourselves to other towns, I'll tell you, my guiding principle as the chair of the Finance Committee has been, we should be leaders, not followers. They should be looking at us and saying, how come they're doing so well? Or how come their finances are working this well? They should be copying us. We shouldn't be copying them. This is not about empowering the TA. We strongly support the TA as an integral part of this process. But as I said, giving the select board more budget authority is not good governance when they spend 35% of the budget. We should retain the town's strong checks and balances. And remember that town administrator authority right now, no matter what we do tonight, is select board authority. That is codified in our town administrator bylaw, town administrator special act. Bylaw changes will survive us, everybody in this room. Okay? So there's no guarantee our town administrator will be as good as the one we have right now. I think that's very important to note. The prior town administrator received approval from that Board of Selectmen and also received positive recommendations from members of our current Board of Selectmen. So it's entirely possible. Nobody knows when they're hiring a town administrator whether they're going to be perfect for the job. The Finance Committee is your financial watchdog. Please allow us to keep doing the job for which you elect us. Okay? We treat all boards and committees the same. We do not develop budgets for individual departments. As I said, to be perfectly clear, there's a big difference between preparing the budget as constructing it from scratch and assembling it and modifying requests to make it all work with the finances. Okay? We have no self-interest in the budget. So for the reasons I've presented, I would ask that you vote no on this. And I will point out also that if the goal is to reevaluate our government structure and look at whether we should have a town manager, whether we should rewrite the special act, whether we should take these actions, that's what we should be doing. The governance committee should come back with a comprehensive plan that says this is how we propose to change Holliston's government, not come in and say, let's change financial responsibilities in direct conflict with the laws we already have and placing a significant part of the budget under the control of a second largest spender in town. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shader. We'll move now to further discussion. Mr. Hearn? Travis? Yeah. Do you want to be heard, Travis? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Go ahead. You switched seats on me. Do you want to be heard, Mr. Sparling? Go right ahead. The age of your moderator showing.
He's better looking than I am, though. All right, so I'm Ben Sparrow, 9 Forest Park Drive, and I'm a member of the Select Board. I have a unique perspective on Article 9 because I've served both on the Finance Committee and on the Select Board. And I support this bylaw. I believe it will generate transparency and clarity in this process. It ensures everyone knows who's doing what and when. Once the Select Board presents the initial budget to the Finance Committee would then generate their recommendations hold the public hearing, and then present them to the Select Board. The town administrator have been working all along with the Finance Committee and the Select Board to ensure everything was in line and balanced. At this time, the Finance Committee would hold a meeting to answer questions from the Select Board, and the Select Board could accept the Finance Committee's recommendation or continue the work to balance the budget with inputs from the town administrator and the Finance Committee. If it cannot be resolved, then town meeting would decide. In the end, town meeting approves a budget, and town meeting is the appropriating authority. The Finance Committee and the Select Board would both be making recommendations. Town meeting would decide if there's a difference. I am not an expert in municipal finance, nor do I know about the day-to-day needs of each department. However, the town administrator does. The town administrator is an educated expert in municipal finance and would be undertaking the task, offering input throughout the process. The financial team of the town works with the town administrator, who reports to the Select Board, and 98% of the work to generate the budget is done by the town administrator. The process as outlined in Article 9 has more inputs and opportunities for collaboration and transparency. It puts dates into law on when items will be completed and by whom. It puts the responsibility of creating the budget in the hands of the expert the town has hired to do so. Leaving it with the Finance Committee, a group of elected officials who have good intentions but are one election away from losing the institutional knowledge and experience required to maintain the budgets in the years to come. The Finance Committee has no paid staff, and the Select Board has the town administrator and the financial team. This bylaw is about the future of Holliston and how the process should work in the years to come. I believe there should be that transparency, collaboration, and that there should be procedures in place that serve the people in Holliston, not just the people who serve on the boards. The Finance Committee has made recent public statements to the effect that the Select Board cannot make good decisions or be trusted with presenting a budget. I personally take exception to that. I take my role very seriously and care passionately and deeply about this town, and I do not take decision-making lightly. The Select Board is charged with heavy tasks that impact the day-to-day lives of residents, and those decisions are important to me. The implication is that I only care about one department or my departments at the expense of others is quite honestly insulting. I'm confused and concerned about these public statements made by the Finance Committee, and I have a question for them. Why do they feel as though you do not think any board, aside from the Finance Committee, can be trusted? I serve on the Select Board because I want to help to make right choices for everyone. My motives are being questioned. I have deep roots in Holliston. I have a 91-year-old grandmother who lives in town, and I have a 2-year-old son. I volunteer to serve this town, and I am your neighbor. I was on the Finance Committee. I was a trusted member of the Finance Committee, yet the Finance Committee now suggests that I cannot make the right choices for Holliston because I'm not on the Finance Committee anymore and I'm on the Select Board. I'd like to better understand that position. I've made every effort to work with their board as well as other boards, and I believe that I deserve, and we all deserve, a better explanation on our position on us, the Select Board. We are back here before town meeting doing the same things we've done before. Our two boards are arguing with each other, questioning the capacity, competency, and ability of each other, and it has to end. We need a defined process. We need transparency. We can put in a process that fixes dates and responsibility, then argue about policy and details, or the endless back and forth between the Select Board and the Finance Committee will continue and impede our ability to get things done for the residents of Holliston. So I did want to make one comment, additional comment. I heard several people talking about how the Finance Committee is transparent, and I think it's a little bit misleading because this is my personal opinion here. I define transparency as including content and process. Their content is available, their meetings are public. However, I don't believe the process is entirely transparent, and I'll give you an example. So the Finance Committee approved the budgets and made their recommendations on April 22nd, I believe it was. It was a Thursday night, correct?
Direct your questions to me, Mr. Sparrow.
So it was on April 22nd that the budgets were approved. If you look at the agenda had words to the effect of deliberations on warrants and budgets and possibility of recommendations. Nothing very clear to say that there was going to be an actual vote on a budget. And when you go on the splash page on the website to find out the calendar, the Finance Committee does not have that meeting as one of the listed meetings that's upcoming. That the meetings are, the meetings that were there are all on Tuesdays. And I just point that out, not because anything was not in public. Everything was open, everything was public. But I think from a transparent perspective, if I'm a resident and I'm trying to figure out what's going on, I don't know. So I heard that comment. I just wanted to indicate that's my personal opinion about that. I urge everyone to vote yes on Article 9, and I thank you for your time.
Further discussion? Further discussion? Yes, sir.
Mark Whitaker, 543 Central Street, member of the Holliston Finance Committee. I'm not quite sure the format to ask this question, but I believe you had voiced a no vote in the previous to this process. And I'm just kind of curious, what made you change your mind? What was the thought process there?
You asking me?
No. I was actually
Asking the
asking
previous
Mr. Sparrow,
speaker?
but I don't know that I can directly address him.
No,
So I just
Go ahead. You want to address that, Mr. Sparrow?
Sure, I can answer that. So the reason I voted no at that time was because I had a question about timing. I had some concerns. I expressed them. I made my vote clear, but I 100% agree with the language within this bylaw. I just had some questions. I made it clear. I made my point, and I've moved on from that particular position, but I do support the language within. So,
Great.
thank you for the question.
Further discussion? Michelle? Zima? Mary?
Michelle Zemer, 583 Winter Street, member of the Finance Committee. I wanted to answer Ben's question. Ben, you asked why we, meaning the Finance Committee, didn't trust you. I've been on the Finance Committee for 10 years. In those 10 years, Ken and I are the only two members that are still on the Finance Committee. The Select Board is different. We're on the third town administrator. The accountant's different. I mean, just about everyone's different. Mary's the same. Other than that, it's different. Bylaws are written for positions, not people. This is not personal. It has nothing to do with you sitting here. It has nothing to do with us. Bylaws are for the future. It's not for right now. So, if that answers your question.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. Mary?
And I also want to say one thing, because people keep talking about 40 years since things have been reviewed. In 1995, the town elected a charter commission. I was a member of that. We met once a week for 18 months. In 1996, there was a charter that wasn't approved. We went through the bylaws line by line. So it hasn't been 40 years since the bylaws were reviewed.
Thank you, Michelle. Mary Greendale?
I'm counting on the technical type. Oh, not yet, I'm on. Well, anyway, I'm Mary Greendale, 198 Highland Street. Okay. I'm going to take this in a slightly different direction. I think my duck says it all anyway. Next slide, please. Oh, wait a minute. I've got the clicker, haven't I? See if I can make that work. Yes. Whoa, what happened to my typeface? Well, I don't know. Cherie, are you out there? Never mind, I'm only kidding. So what this says, although even I can't read that with my glasses on, resolves the interpretations of existing laws. Article 9, resolves the interpretations of existing laws, makes the town administrator responsible and accountable for compiling the annual comprehensive budget for town meeting, makes the budget process fully open and transparent, restores the decision-making to town meeting when our elected officials cannot come to agreement on a budget number, and makes our processes consistent with best practices. You've heard that. See what happens here. All right, so that's a law. You've already seen a piece of that. That's the state law. It says the Finance Committee shall consider the budget. And then the act, seriously? Thank you. There's our special act. And again, we've gone through this, and I'm not going to bore you to tears. We've got a lot of work to do. This is what the whole debate is about. What do these things really say? And I also have the section from the Mass Association of Finance, committees. Okay, so what? We can't agree on it. We haven't agreed on it. We keep going back and forth. Now, the FinCom is supposed to be an advisory committee. It's supposed to show their recommendations against a comprehensive budget. If there's any disagreement, town meeting is the place where those decisions are supposed to be made. So, Team Holliston is how I put this. This government requires collaboration and teamwork above all else. We need clear rules to make that work. To me, it makes sense to have one person guide the entire budget process with no cracks. Now, I said guide the decision process. I'm not saying that the TA should go in and tell any budget or any department what its budget should be. So, this is our town government. You'll notice we're in charge. We're all the way at the top. It's all about us. And yet you and I all know that we're not really in charge. But because of the fact that, we can change it. Ooh, thank you. These folks are all your elected officers, your elected officials. No one on that black line is supposed to be telling the other ones on that black line what to do. And as we've already said, the Finance Committee is an advisory committee making recommendations. Now, it's important to realize that that means that I can't go over to the park department or nobody can tell the park department what to do. Town administrator can't, select board can't, blah-de-da-de-da. They're all equal. They're all independent. Well, when it comes time to try to get everybody to go in the same direction, it requires a fair amount of effort, I should say. So the town administrator absolutely needs to have a good disposition, if nothing else, and have the ability to be able to get folks together in agreement. Could you change the slide? Thank you. So what Article 9 will do, it's hopefully would clarify the Act of 1994. It will not limit the FinCom in terms of being able to review all of the budgets. In terms of compiling a budget, we'll be getting to that. It will make the process completely open and transparent with deadlines and public hearings. That's the big piece that seems to be missing from my standpoint. I know I can watch the FinCom meetings, and I do watch them sometimes, or I turn on just the audio and listen to them. But what it will not allow is the current practice, including the very late release of the budget. It will not rely only on FinCom meetings for public awareness. It will involve other meetings. It will make our process consistent with the Department of Revenue's. We'll finally get consistent with the warnings that we've had from the Department of Revenue in the past. We'll restore decision-making to the residents. And actually, that's the biggest thing to me. No one is in charge of the budget. And no one can be held accountable. Therein lies the big issue. I believe we need to think about why should the town administrator be responsible? It's a he now, someday let's hope it's a woman, no offense intended, Travis. He's the only one in government with the appropriate professional experience. It's a holistic position. He sees everything from the inside. Full-time, day-to-day, eyes on everything. Paid according to his financial expertise. Let's use it. Paid to be accountable, but he needs the authority to do his job. We can't hold him accountable unless he also has the authority to do the work and to make sure that our needs are met and some of our wants. We need consistency and predictability. He can put processes into place, put documents in place. The whole 9 yards could be a package. So if you look at the TA job description, which is the next slide, you'll see that a proven record of leadership, to be a strategic thinker, instill confidence, and know how to lead through influence. It's not that the TA is going to go around and tell the different departments what to do. And all the way along, the Finance Committee is a partner, just as he was this time. I think everything went pretty smoothly this year. I think everybody was relatively comfortable about working with a new person and blah, 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 and it all seemed to work pretty well. Now, during the search for the town administrator, we were told by the search company, we meaning the town, by the search company that in order to find a really qualified person, you need to have a budget process in place. And that makes it far more comfortable for the town administrator to know exactly what his responsibilities are, but also he knows he's going to be held accountable because let's face it, if anything went wrong, we probably would turn and look at him and say, what happened? Throughout all of this conversation, we haven't been focusing on town meeting, and that's really my biggest concern. What falls off the plate, are we to that slide, sorry, between the time we start the budget process and then we get to the end? That's the part that has always bothered me about this and I won't say always, it bothers me, period. We don't know how the Finance Committee gets to those decisions unless we watch every week. But when you get to town meeting and it's already all in the omnibus, you can't really change anything either. Because, well, when you try, you'll find out it's a balanced budget and nobody wants you changing it. And that's what you're told. And you're told to figure out where to get the money from. But of course, you can't figure out where to get the money from because you're really not qualified to figure out where to get the money from. So to me, it becomes a catch-22. So I'm going to show you what I like. This is from the Danvers budget. And it shows you, and it is not the only one in the state who does this. I went through dozens of these, but this one I'll explain. Town administrator, select board, and FinCom. When people disagree, okay, if you look at it and you say, FinCom says it should be less or it should be more, you have a conversation at town meeting. It isn't that the Finance Committee sits at one of their meetings and decides that the Board of Health doesn't need this, or we can't afford this year, or it's something more important somewhere else. All of which are very hard decisions, and I'm not criticizing that they themselves doing them, but it's just hard to be sitting in town meeting and you get the budget in your hand, you don't know what's left behind. And there haven't been public conversations about what's been left behind. Now, if you turn to ours, the next page, it's limited information. I'd like to see something different. So the town administrator, we can skip to the next pretty picture. Okay, he comes from other places. And now you can skip again. You can go to the next one, please. Thank you. This is what Mr. Ahern, the town administrator, instituted in Danvers. And what I like about this one in particular, is that it spells out something in a way that even I can understand it. Because I will admit, a lot of what Ken explains, which he does very well, a lot of what he explains, I'm not sure I understand it. But anyway, so these are the 4 pillars, if you will, with which you can judge our financial condition. And if you turn to the next one, again, this is another example of the kinds of information that he was putting together in Danvers. Now, for better or for worse, to me, it looks like it would be something that would be useful to me to understand where the money goes, would help. There were many other pages. I just used that one as an example. But it provides additional information, and it also looks at the whole picture and says this is how it all, how we're doing. There's something like 14 different considerations. So that's sort of what I wanted to say about town meeting, the fact that with a different approach, with a different format, with a different, we'd be able to get more information about what the select board, the town administrator, the finance committee. It could just be the finance committee and the town administrator, whatever we wanted to do. But it's another way to think about how this whole process works. So then there was this one really upset me when we started to hear language about, that the select board might have manipulate the budget to fund pet projects and stuff. I don't know what could be a pet project, but okay. To me, that's just an alarmist kind of thing. This is, in the worst of situations, we can't keep secrets in town government. You can't have a birthday party keep a secret in the town hall. They'll all know about it, so it's just almost impossible. But underneath that question is a very serious question. If you change the page, what happens if the town administrator and any elected board, we'll say the assessors, since I sit on the assessors, and so the town administrator says one thing, and I'm sitting there on the assessors, and we decide, no, we can't live with that. What happens? We're deadlocked, right? Well, excuse me, I'm sorry, I think I'm going to be losing my voice. Anyway, someone has to break the tie. And I hear the concern from the Finance Committee. I understand what they're saying. That is a little bit like, wow, who's going to do this? Well, statutorily, the Finance Committee doesn't have the authority to choose between one and the other. The state gives the select board the authority to do it in that situation, and voters at town meeting should be the ones that ultimately make the choices. Now, should we be concerned about graft or misuse? I just don't see it. I don't see it, but if anything goes wrong, it's not going to be the Finance Committee that's in trouble. It's going to be the select board, no matter where it is. Because statutorily, that's the board that is considered the chief elected officers. They're the ones that are going to hold the bag. And there's not much that they can do about it. But we're back to the room where everybody's trying to decide. We've got this deadlock situation. It's the assessors and the Finance Committee. We disagree. Finance Committee's in the room. The select board has to decide what it's going to recommend in its budget. So it decides it's going to go with the assessors. The Finance Committee is right there. They say no, they want their number. And if you think back to what I showed you from Danvers, where there are separate columns for these different recommendations. So now when it gets to town meeting can see that the Board of Assessors and the Finance Committee, or TA, whichever it was that was posed, didn't agree, and now let's have a conversation. Let's figure out why. Because lots of times it's important to know what is falling off the plate, so to speak. So, my big complaint, the Finance Committee numbers go to town meeting. We don't know how they got to those numbers unless we watch every meeting. We can't change the things when they get to town meeting, and it ends up feeling like a catch-22. So, it feels to me like town meeting has become a rubber stamp for FinCom. Oh, I was showing you, I had that other slide in there for a minute, but town meeting has become a rubber stamp for FinCom. The entire budget very often goes through without discussion. Those of us who've been here a while can remember when that was not the case. And so I think the process is broken, but there's another question. The Finance Committee has been saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But are we satisfied with what we're getting out of our tax dollars? Right now, our taxes are in the top 12% out of the entire state. Do you feel like you're getting that value? Is there something we should be doing differently? Can we spend smarter? I don't know the answer to that, but I'm thinking if you have this central person who can kind of be watching everything and pulling all of this information together, and if in fact we have a long-range strategic plan or something with which that person can work, you start setting priorities for what you want ahead. You start setting the goals, and then the money has to, funnel around and do all of the good things that it has to do. But at least you have somebody that's corralling it and making it all happen year after year. Now, from my standpoint, are all things working? No. Some of the roads make my teeth rattle. What about the high school building? Youth and Family Services can't keep up. The schools have slipped in ratings. Prospective home buyers know this. One of my favorites, oops, lost my slides. Downtown businesses need a solution for their wastewater management downtown. All of those things are issues that have to be dealt with. And I'm saying, in my own mind, let the town administrator run with the ball. Let him build the budget based on what he sees every day, manage the process by consensus. He will always know because he works in the building. But then make sure the Finance Committee is there from a distance, checking it all out, reviewing it now with a cold, clear, clinical eye, not buried in it day after day after day. And let them review it, and then come tell us, hey, this might work, but the sure as heck isn't going to work. So that they actually report back to town meeting, which is how it's supposed to work. And yes, they do report to us. But again, it's pretty well fixed in cement by the time it gets here. And, well, sadly, you're not going to see the fun pictures. So we have, in my view, a first world problem. Let's face it, this isn't the end of the world. This isn't going to change life as we know it. So I'm going to make a little plea among all of my elected official friends and colleagues and counterparts that we better stop the infighting. There has to be, whatever happens tonight, we have to find a way to get past this impasse. And if it means that we hire an outside mediator to come in, I'm all for it. We used to laugh and make jokes about towns that would fight between their departments. I don't like that that's one of us right now. So, to wrap it up, I would like us to approve this, to nail down the process so that it's transparent with dates, deadlines, public hearings, so we can weigh in with our concerns in advance of town meeting. Then when town meeting comes, if there are differences, we'll get to understand them. I'd like the town administrator to be the one to guide this process and to keep an eye on the whole picture. And I'd like to see some new innovative reports that come to us. And I'd like to see Holliston move a little bit out of the 18th century and into the 21st in terms of understanding that volunteers do a great job in creating the policies and so forth, but in the final analysis, it really does come down to who's in the building day to day that keeps everything going. Thank you.
Thank you.
Diane, before I entertain further comment, can you check with the cafeteria and see if anybody there wants to be heard? I have a feeling they may be feeling like second-class citizens over there, and I want to give them a chance to speak. While you're addressing that, further discussion here? Yes, ma'am. Sir, ma'am. Nobody there? Okay. The cafeteria is content, so we'll keep the debate going here.
Lisa Brown, 145 Hollis Street.
I have never served on one of the boards in town. I do volunteer quite a bit in town. Clearly, there's a whole level of things that I don't know about that's going on here. There's some infighting that those of us who aren't in the building day to day clearly don't know about. But one thing I do know is I have a degree in American government, and last I checked, separation of power was a very important principle. What I saw in the original slideshow was the executive branch would both control the purse and then execute the spending. That I know I vote for them. I don't know any of them personally, but I know I vote for them. So I do get Mrs. Greendale's point that town meeting is the ultimate decider, so it does come back to the legislative branch in us. But honestly, when I cast my vote, because I come to every town meeting, I know that they're my caretakers as the FinCom, and I feel good about having that separation of powers. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Pam?
Sorry, I got 2 masks on. Hi, it's Pam Zico, 180 Fisk Street. I haven't been here for a while. But I did want to speak to, I wanted to hear from town council. Because Ken brought up some really good points on general law and bylaw. And I want to know if he has reviewed all those and what he thinks of them, or she. But I think it's a man in the back.
It is. I can at least confirm that. Mr. Talman, you want to respond to Ms. Zico's inquiries with respect to the described alleged deficiencies regarding the bylaw and perhaps its conflict with the special legislation adopted by the town earlier? Okay, sure, Jim. Watch your step. Take your time.
Hi, Jay Tallerman, Town Council. Pretty open-ended question, always dangerous to ask a lawyer too much of an open-ended question. I'm not going to wade into some of the policy issues here because every town that has a finance committee and a select board do things a little differently. The relationship exists to provide the checks and balances that a lot of people have talked about tonight. And that evolves generally in different ways in different towns. And it's not always the same. Sometimes the finance committee is very strong. Sometimes the select board is really strong. However, the statutes are really clear, in my opinion. The statutes say the select board's in charge. The select board is in charge of creating the warrant, and on the warrant goes the budget. The finance committee is absolutely 100% charged with the ability, should they choose to exercise it, to submit a recommendation, including a budget, a recommended budget, to town meeting. The select board could submit their own budget. The check and balance is that those two entities are to work together generally to see if it's the same budget. If it's not, the primacy belongs to the select board. The select board's authority to develop the warrant and present in the first instance the budget to town meeting is clear in the statutes, whereas the role of the finance committee is more advisory under the statutes. Now, looking at Holliston's bylaws, there's a little bit more language than in the statutes, but not a lot. And I think that although people can characterize the existing status of the bylaws, I don't think, and I've opined on this, that the existing roles are any different than the state statutes. While the Finance Committee has some specific defined roles in this town, I think that right now their authority is still just advisory and the Select Board still controls. However, some of those roles obviously are not fully understood in some ways. This bylaw does provide a little bit more timeline. It provides structure. I don't think it changes the roles by statute. The role still belongs to the select board if there's a disagreement at what gets presented in the first instance in the warrant and under the main motion, and then subject to discussion and recommendation and motions to amend by the Finance Committee. This bylaw provides a timeline and a little more structure to that, but the roles are already set by statute. So those that have suggested that there's an advisory role here and the role of developing the warrant there are correct. This is just providing some mechanisms so that they have a means of working together, but it's not changing anything. I don't view it as revolutionary in terms of what's allowed under the statutes or what's allowed right now. It's just adding a little bit more meat to the bone. That's my general view.
Thank you, Jay. Pam?
Yeah, so you're saying the Massachusetts general laws that he's referring to?
So this,
pretty much what
use the microphone, Pam.
So you're saying that the Massachusetts general laws you're referring to as the statutes? Or are you referring to the bylaws as the statutes?
Go ahead, Jay.
So what I'm saying is the statute lays out the roles and responsibilities, the law. The special act that the town administrator, that we've developed for the town administrator, somewhat cements that process by putting the town administrator in charge of compiling everything for review by the Finance Committee and the Select Board. Your local bylaws, which lay in a matter of hierarchy beneath the statutes, don't do anything different than that. They have a little bit more verbiage, but it's still not different than the statute. This bylaw doesn't change the statute either. It just fills in with timelines and process some of the things that Ms. Greendale was suggesting that she had a desire to implement. I hope that helps.
So again, statutes are a mass general law? That was my question.
Statutes are mass general laws plus the special act that we've adopted.
Thank you so much.
Bylaws are one step below that.
My next question is referring to Mary Greendale when she said that, we want to know what fell off the plate. And I'm wondering how long we want to be at town meeting to find out all the little things that fall off the plate. So I really hope you vote this down. I think it was really quick coming to fruition, considering that the Governance Committee's first meeting was July 30th last year. This is a major bylaw change, and it's been a pandemic. Not a lot of us have been able to attend like we really normally want and be involved. Maybe we are watching the Zoom meetings. But I personally believe that the Governance Committee has overstepped their scope to begin with. I would like to see a strategic plan developed, and that's part of their mission, to develop a strategic plan. And I'd like to see that first before they go into this, big change. I think that the Finance Committee has done well. I think with a AAA A+ rating that we've had over the years. I know that we had a little problem, I guess, with the town administrator beforehand, but what did we feel out of that? Did something happen? Did we stop having water in the town? Did insurance not get paid, or did they step up and take care of it? So I just think it could be held off for a while, maybe to see that strategic plan. Thank you.
Further discussion? Sam?
Sam Tyler, 353 Chamberlain Street. As chair of this governance committee, I want to just go over a few things. One is that we went through a very extensive process of looking at what other towns do, and it was sort of very comprehensive scores of other towns. From that, we identified comparable towns, and from that, we identified 15 towns that we decided to spend more time with. They also had very good budget bylaw articles that we could use as models. We went to trouble, oh, actually, that's not the way to say it. Each of us individually got involved with 3 towns and developing relationships with the town manager or the town administrator. And in other cases, it could have been the finance director or other officials to learn more about the process, because, the bylaws or charters could be limiting in terms of the words and the extent of information provided. So that took a good amount of time to really understand what other towns are doing, looking at the trends that we were seeing, and from that, I think we then were able to look at the budget bylaw issue and come up with a plan that we thought made a lot of sense. We've also seen, as the slideshow showed, town government is much more complex and demanding, and conditions change. Certainly, we've seen that with the pandemic. And so that we're seeing more towns basically beef up their financial management in terms of positions and the qualifications required. And Holliston really hasn't done that. So I think in our view, we're trying to catch up, trying to modernize town government, and starting with the budget development process, because that was where there was some tension, and figured that would be a good start. I think we've got a lot more work to do, where we have a 3-year term, and we've got a sort of a game plan of what we'll do in other town meetings, and trying to come in with one big comprehensive plan is not realistic in terms of a town meeting. We're doing it piece by piece, but it'll all be part of one package. I want to get back to the issue of the Finance Committee and its role beyond what Mr. Tallerman said, and just be a little more specific. In terms of the statute, the state statute authorizing the Finance Committee basically says the Finance Committee shall consider any and all municipal questions for the purpose of making reports or recommendations to the town. It doesn't say develop the budget or develop the guidelines or make decisions that affect policy in the budget process. It's consider municipal questions for meeting reports or recommendations. It is the check and balance of the budget process, and it needs to be independent in order to be able to do that. And if they're going to be involved with the budget development process, as we indicated in the slide, it compromises their ability to be that independent check and balance. You can't build the budget and then comment on it and expect it to be, objective or independent. So if you want the checks and balances, you want a finance committee that is able to take the budget, review it, and contrary to what we've heard, there's no limitation on information available to the finance committee. That's a red herring. We've built into this bylaw even more extensive language as to what information is available. So any information that the Finance Committee is going to want in developing the budget, reviewing the budget, I should say, that's going to be there. That check and balance hasn't changed, but it needs to be separate and independent to be effective. And we need to take advantage of the professionals in our town working full-time to develop the budget, to develop the parameters, the guidelines, the mission statement for the budget, the direction for town departments in terms of building the budget, compiling the budget, and basically take advantage of the professional staff. And frankly, that's what we're seeing in more and more towns. Most towns that have a town administrator or a town manager, what we're recommending is exactly the way they operate. And, one other fact point is there are 292 municipalities in Massachusetts that have a town form of government. only 44 are elected. That's 15% of all the towns have an elected finance committee. So if that's such a great model, how come so few towns are using it? The finance committee, however they're selected, is an important body in terms of the independent review and recommendations that it can make to town meeting. But we're recommending what we're seeing in so many other towns in terms of the full-time professionals being responsible for the development of the budget. And, the potential bias, I don't think we've seen that. If the finance committee or if the select board has had, as we have heard, the authority to make the decisions on the budget, it really hasn't, it's been rarely exercised in the sense that there has been an effort on both the finance committee side and the town government side to reconcile any differences prior to town meeting. And so you don't see that much of a conflict. I mean, where there are differences, the finance committee can make recommendations, but I think what we're recommending, a process that makes sense for the 21st century. Now, there's no question that the last town administrator wasn't interested in the financial management so much, and the finance committee really stepped in to fill that void, and we should all be thankful for that because it got us through that period. But that involved them getting involved with budget decision-making, policy-making, not just the review. And this is the power they talk about not wanting to lose. But times have changed. We have a new town administrator who is an expert in municipal finance. We've got a strong, experienced collector treasurer, town accountant, principal assessor that form the financial team. And they're the ones that really should be preparing the budget. So I'll just end with that.
Mr. Marsden? Ken, I see you. I'll get to you shortly. I've got two people ahead of you that I've noted already. Thank you. Thank you for your patience.
So first, I'll be brief.
Identify yourself, please.
Sorry, Jay Marsden, 32 Wendy Lane. I hope I never have to live in that hellscape that's been described by some people as to the state that we find ourselves in today, because I don't recognize that town. I don't know where that place exists, but it sounds like a horrible place to be. I served almost 10 years on your Board of Selectmen. I sat through 18 budget cycles. This, from my perspective, if it matters, this is a solution that's looking for a problem. We worked collaboratively, and I served on multiple boards with multiple town administrators, both of who have been referenced here tonight. We worked collaboratively year over year over year with the Finance Committee. We didn't always agree. There were certainly many situations where we were told to go back and sharpen our pencils on some type of idea or some type of issue that we had put forward. I can't think of, there may be some, but I can't think of any situations where we did not approach something from a policy perspective, sit down, talk through the numbers, and figure out how to get something accomplished. It was just never an issue. I mean, we went so far as to essentially ask for a blank check to fight a casino that was supposed to go into Milford and ask for about $100,000. What we were going to do with it at the time, we had really no idea. We had a general blueprint of how that money was going to be used. There was some discussions, and there was an opportunity to do something that put this town on the right side of something that was going to be a disaster for us. This is a collaboration issue more than anything. People have mentioned the checks and balances. People have mentioned separation of powers. I think those things are very important. And the other thing that I do want to point out is some years ago, we had, for any number of reasons, a handful of vacancies on the Finance Committee. And we approached the town and we said to the town, we as the Board of Selectmen would just like the authority to appoint somebody to this committee. We're going to have hearings, we're going to have meetings, it's going to be an open process, but for any number of reasons, we were just running into trouble finding the right bodies to put in those seats. And the town, this is just to fill a vacancy, and the town's overwhelming response was absolutely not. And it was for that reason. People wanted independence, they wanted to be in control, they wanted separation, and I think that for people who share those concerns, I think the answer is to vote this down. Again, I think this is a solution that's looking for a problem. Thank you very much.
Go ahead, sir. Not yet. I think we need, I know the debate's been long, but it's important. Yes, sir. Do you want to be heard? Yeah.
Mark Aronian, 107 Concord Street. I'm in favor of the article, actually. I, too, was on the Board of Select, and I found that residents came to me many times with confusion about process. And I think this would really help in that regard. It organizes and it labels who's responsible for what. But more than that, I like the fact that it's going to bring people together. Part of the program is to bring the school committee in with the Select Board and the Finance Committee and others and talk about things. And I think that's very healthy. I like the timelines because a lot of department heads would come to me when I was chair and were confused about timelines and not having enough time for their budget review. So I really like the structure. I think that, I've been running a company for 35 years. And you can't be afraid of change. I know that we can get comfortable with the things that we do and the way things are, but I really do think that we can do better with a little more structure, and I really don't see that anything is being taken away from the Finance Committee. And I think the Finance Committee, if they're unhappy about something, you're going to know about it. We know that there'll be a town meeting. They'll always express in detail very well what their opinions are. And I think you want that. And I think that's where you get that separation of duties. And I think they do their job very well. They come out with a very comprehensive. Ken is extremely good as an orator, and the slide shows, and I'm not worried about the Finance Committee not being heard or not being part. It seemed to me that they're very much involved in the process that was outlined for Article 9. And I do think that at the end of the day, if something goes bad, it is the executive board, it is the select board that definitely has the responsibility. And I think it's important for our town administrator, who's the boss of the whole town hall, has town department meetings constantly, has the pulse of the town, understands the real realities of each department, because he's there every day. He understands the pressures of each department, the individualities of each department. He's also in charge of the employees. It's important for him to have the authority to carry out his job. After all, we had the confidence to hire him as the chief executive of Town Hall. So let's follow through, and let's vote Article 9 in. Thank you.
Ken, you did speak earlier, and I recognize that, but there's been a lot of debate since you had your chance to talk, so I wanted to give you a chance to respond.
Yes, that's exactly what I was saying. I don't want to speak very long. I just want a chance to respond.
Whatever you need to say, go right ahead.
You've heard a lot tonight. You've heard a lot. I want to make one thing perfectly clear. Our opposition is not us versus the town administrator. You've heard a bunch of speakers. Mary got up. Mark just got up. Said, let the town administrator do his job. Let him do all his nice, great things. The Finance Committee has no opposition whatsoever. That's not what this bylaw is about, okay? Nothing in this bylaw says the town administrator can't work with us, can't give us all the data, can't present. We've already started working on capital to the point where Travis has already come up with new capital sheets, and he's given us, during the process this time, he gave us data in a new format that he wanted to use. We never opposed that. This is not the Finance Committee versus the town administrator. We love Travis. We want him to succeed. We will do everything we can to help him succeed. What this is about is codifying in the bylaws that the budget you consider for approval comes from the second largest spending authority in the town. That's the most important issue that's in here, okay? I wanted to address one other thing, which was Mr. Sparrow commented about us approving budgets on April 22nd. And just to be clear, and this is not, I'm not saying this to be contentious, but just to clarify that, the reason we ended up meeting on April 22nd was because the warrant wasn't delivered to us until April 20th. So part of the problem was we had to delay our process till we got a warrant from the select board that was approved. That's okay. I'm not complaining about that. They have a lot of work to do, and we understand that. But to then turn to the Finance Committee and say you had no idea that we were going to be voting, and it's, I just think that that's disingenuous. But I wanted to just, the thing I felt passionate about was this is not the Finance Committee limiting the ability of the TA to do his job. We want him to succeed. This is about putting in, as I said, if the issue is you want the town administrator to have these capabilities, go back and change the special act first, and let's have that debate over what we want our town administrator to do, and set in that his budget responsibilities are independent from the select board, so that it is not a case that the town administrator is operating under the influence of the second largest spender. Nothing we've said tonight changes that fact about what's in front of you tonight. Nothing. The Finance Committee is independent. We recommend a budget to you, and by the way, with regards to the budget, I will say this. We keep hearing the Finance Committee making the budget is not right. I agree with that. We don't make the budgets. Every department makes their own budget. We then put them all together, and then what we have to do, which is not addressed anywhere in here, okay, and in fact has technical flaws as well, is what happens when everybody gives you their budget and it's too much money? It's more money than the town has. Someone has to go look at that and say, okay, where's the money being requested? What are the needs? What are the priorities? And how do we adjust those recommendations, what was requested from us, to go to town meeting and say, here's a balanced budget? That is why we are completely independent. That's exactly why we exist. And this bylaw transfers that power to the second largest spending authority in town. So so the question is, okay, who's going to do it? Are they going to come in, present a balanced budget to you based on their interpretation of the priorities of the town? We'd love to hear those priorities. We ask them for them constantly. But when it comes time to decide, okay, of the finite pie,
who gets what, that's exactly what you want us to do, because we have no self-interest in the outcome. None whatsoever, except for our $1,500, okay? That, I think, is the point you want to emphasize. Would you stand here and give the school committee the priority to the decision, basically give them the power to present a recommended budget to town meeting? I think everybody would look at that and say, we wouldn't want to do that because the school committee is looking out for their own interests, like they're supposed to do. Mary Greendale showed you an org chart, and if you looked under select board, there was a gigantic number of departments under there. That's the 30 budgets I'm talking about. Right now, with our statutory structure, under our special act, those 30 budgets, the balancing of the overall town budget would be done by a department that controls 30 of the 43 budget lines. To me, as a resident, forget about the finance committee, as a resident, that's not what I would want. I would want an independent board to do that process of gathering all the budgets together and saying to the town, this is how we decided to distribute the money. It is always town meeting's decision to decide what to do with the money. Always, whether it's the TA doing it, us doing it, anybody doing it. Always up to you. The question is, what do you want to hear? Do you want to hear a budget that comes from the people that have no interest in the budget? That working with our professional to get all that data? As I said, this is not an us versus him. We love the job he's doing. Okay? So I'll stop there, but I also know that, I know Henry's had his hand up for a while, so I hope that Henry gets a chance to speak, because he was involved in this process years ago.
Thank you. I'm going to hear from the cafeteria first. I've requested comments from the cafeteria. We do have a citizen that wants to be heard, so let's reach out to her. And I'm going to allow 2 or 3 more speakers, and I will call on Henry and Mr. Cronin, and then I'll entertain a motion. From the cafeteria, please.
Hi, it's Joan Shaughnessy from the Kids Table. I live at 87 Morton Street in Brentwood, Holliston. We have heard quite a lot of accolades for Travis. And Travis, I'd like to hear from you. I don't want to put you on the spot and say, which do you want? But I do want to ask, well, I do want to ask you that, but if that makes you uncomfortable, could you tell us if you believe that the model that you worked under in Danvers was effective in helping you succeed in your role there? And is the model that we have here impeding in any way your vision for your role in Holliston?
Do you want to be heard, Travis?
Thank you, Travis Ahern. I am not going to give you a yay or nay on this article. I'm just going to share just actually one last point I jotted down when the chair of the FinCom was speaking, which was that, you know, at some point, the Finance Committee is the one that compiles everything at the end, and that's the process that we want. I think the only thing I would point out is that what that means is that when you only have one person compiling at the end, is that that's really the only person looking at the holistic picture. And I think one thing that I'd like to work towards, with or without excuse me, Article 9, it's a little late, I apologize. With or without Article 9, I think the one thing that I'd like to work towards is that the Finance Committee, when it's making a recommendation, is being brought a balanced budget in a way that is balanced by another body, right? In this case, it would be the town administrator. And therefore, if the Finance Committee would balance a budget in a different way, town meeting is then able to look at multiple ways to balance it. That doesn't have to be that town meeting is receiving 2 budgets. I think through this budget process that I went through this year for the first time in Holliston, I would say that there are really not a lot of differences the way that I would approach this from the Finance Committee. I think, you know, following a number of the regulations that we all talked about, whether it be from the way that this process works, I don't see a lot of differences, and I think that, you know, certainly one thing I would see is an ability to reach consensus in this process. But I would like to see, I think that was mentioned earlier, is that what town meeting sees is everything that was laid out through the process, right? A department head or a department elected makes a request, that's referenced. The town administrator makes a recommendation, that's referenced. You can see the difference. In a number of instances, it's really just to make sure the bottom line works. If the select board disagrees with the town administrator recommendation, then you would see that difference as well. And then finally, what you would see is the finance committee recommendations. And I think the point that was made also previously was that may lead to town meeting getting a motion on every single budget. I would hope not. I don't think that that's where we are. I think that at most there would be a couple differences in the way that we would balance a budget, and then town meeting decides. And I don't have any concern with the way Article 9 is written in that regard. I don't have any concern from my first process through here that we can work towards that. And so I think to answer Ms. Shaughnessy's question, to me, Article 9 certainly represents what I'm used to from the town of Weston, from the town of Danvers. But again, I won't take an official stance here on that. And I hope that answers your question, Ms. Shaughnessy.
Thank you. I think that the topic has been fairly debated, but I would be remiss in my duties as moderator if I didn't allow Henry Delica an opportunity to address us. So I'll take the last comments from Henry, and then I'll entertain a motion to move the question. Henry? If it doesn't violate the chief's protocol.
Thank you, but I'm not going to accept anything from either of the boards. And I want to thank the study committee for their joint 100 years of service to the town. I'm going to brag a little bit. I've done 50 years service to Holliston. Building committees, Council on Aging, ZBA, Civil Defense when it existed, 30 years elected position, 12 years selectman, 16 planning board, 2 years on the water department. Somebody would quit and they couldn't find anybody to run. I can remember when the finance committee had members that were also elected members of the school committee, water, even selectmen. And those were the years when we fought like heck at town meeting over the budgets. There was always one group that wanted it, one that didn't. During one of my periods on the Board of Selectmen, we worked with the committee to change the finance committee so that it had no one that held office, appointed or elected, or worked for the town. Since that time, things have improved. I think one reason is now the FinCom is elected based on their position and ability in finance, and nothing else. The Board of Selectmen, as I know, is selected largely on popularity. Or you might have done something else first that people liked, so gee, I'll vote for him. All I can say is we have been working for years now here at town meeting, moving smoothly. Very few people have indicated that they disagreed with what was being presented. That means the system is working. You know, we're not one of those other 43 towns. We're Holliston. And in Holliston, we do what you want, not what somebody else is doing. So, to quote Mary, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Thank you.
John Cronin, did you want to be heard? I'll entertain Selectman Cronin's last comments, and I'll take a motion to move the question. Go ahead,
Thank
John.
you, Mr. Moderator. I trust I will be the most brief speaker of the evening. I just wanted to pass along my appreciation to the Governance Committee when the Select Board charged them with their 3-year term to come up with ways to improve the way Holliston works. We envisioned them challenging the status quo and to look at how Holliston is governing it itself. Can we do better? We did not wrap ourselves up in the notion that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. We imagine better things. These better things come from experience and the view of other communities. This evening, we've had a robust discussion about that. That's, I think, all we could have hoped for. We place this in your hands for your judgment to find out what's best for our community, because in the end, I think we can all settle on the fact that we'll accept the outcome and move forward, because at the end of the day, as Henry said, we are Holliston, we do things the right way. So I want to thank everybody for the discussions this evening. Let's move to a vote, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Moderator.
I'll entertain a motion to move the question. Is there a second? That's not debatable. All those in favor of hearing the motion heard, say aye. Those opposed? That carries. Now, since it's been a while, I'll reread the motion. The move that this article be approved as presented in Exhibit B of the warrant document with strike-through used to indicate the removal of language and from existing bylaws and bold type to indicate new language. Since it would be inconceivable that this would be a unanimous vote, we're going to have a vote by raise of hands, okay? So we have tellers in each of the sections here and in the cafeteria, so all those in favor of the article, please raise their hand. Do we have our counters in action? Yeah? Okay. Keep your hands up high, please, and keep them up until the counter dismisses you. The gentle lady from Erin Way. No. How many? 8? 18 or 8? Okay, thanks. Do we have to wait for the calf? I'll start with the pluses. All those opposed, please raise your hand. We all counted in here? We're all counted in here. You can put your hands down. Thank you. We're just waiting for the cafeteria results to come in. What do you think?
Yes, no.
Okay. Does that include the calf or not?
Yep.
Oh. Okay, the vote is 91 in favor, 133 opposed. The article is not passed. We'll move to Article 10. Article 10 reads as follows: to see if the town will vote to amend its general bylaws by amending Article 1 entitled Town Meetings and Article 3 entitled Select Board as shown on Exhibit C attached to this warrant. The motion is move that this article be approved as presented in Exhibit B of the warrant document with strike-through used to indicate the removal of language from existing bylaws and bold type to indicate the new language. A Finance Committee recommendation indicates that they recommended favorable action on this action. The Government Committee has requested to make a presentation. I believe that Mr. Engel did make a presentation in connection with Article 9, so I will assume that that presentation is their presentation with respect to Article 10. Did I have a second? The motion is, as I've read it. Is there a second to the motion? Any discussion? I'm sorry, Mr. Engel, could you give us a brief explanation, please, again, to refresh the meeting's memory with respect to Article 10 and what it's intended to accomplish? I think there may be some question in the mind of the public that given the non-passage of Article 9, is it still the Government Study Committee's desire that this article be passed independently of that failed article?
Glenn Engel, 660 Winter Street. Slightly less controversial. Article 10 focuses on changes to the spring annual town meeting date and the fall annual town meeting date, moving the fall annual town meeting date to the third Monday in October and the spring annual town meeting date to the second Monday in May, and establishes a new electronic talent bank system on the town's website to provide relevant information about opportunities to serve the town and identify registered voters who are interested in serving on town committee, board, and commissions.
Thank you, Mr. Engel. Any further discussion? And we'll do this one on a voice vote. Then all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? So voted. Article 11 was handled by the consent agenda. We can bypass that. Article 12 was handled by the consent agenda, as was Article 13. As was Article 14. As was Article 15. As was Article 16. We'll move, as was Article 17. Aren't you glad you voted for that consent agenda? We'll move to Article 18, the omnibus budget. My hope would be that we can get through the omnibus this evening before our 11 o'clock adjournment time, but we'll see how that goes. Article 18 is sponsored by, I guess, the FinCom? I hate to touch that live rail. The article is as it is. To see Article 18, to see what money the town will vote to raise and appropriate, transfer from available funds to meet expenses and outlays to town departments, salaries of town offices, sundry and miscellaneous but regular expenditures for a reserve fund, and to appoint trustees or caretakers, or authorize the select board to appoint caretakers of the cemeteries of the town not otherwise provided for the ensuing year, or to take any action relative thereto. The FinCom recommends unanimous favorable action on this omnibus budget. Suggested motion: move that the town raise and appropriate $64,059,082 and appropriate $2,513,721 from the Water Enterprise Fund to meet the expenses and outlays for town departments, salaries of town offices, sundry and miscellaneous but regular expenditures, for a reserve fund, and for other expenses of the town not otherwise provided for, with all departmental expenses reflected in the recommended column of the omnibus budget as presented in the warrant document on pages 50 through 53. This will require a majority vote when we get there. You'll note that we have a slightly simplified format for you this evening. That's not intended to discourage debate or questions, but simply to put it in a more expeditious fashion, so to speak. Was there a second to the motion? Second. Fine, thank you. Excuse me if you already did it. Select Board, 5,100 at 51,000 account, personal services, $336,482. Other expenses, $117,133. Total for the Select Board, $453,615. Any debate on that? If not, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed? So voted. The FinCom, personal services, $1,220. Other expenses, $305. Total budgeted requested amount, recommended amount, $1,525. Any discussion? If not, then all those in favor say aye. Those opposed? So voted. Other financial administration, reserved for transfers, $325,000. Identified as from the reserve fund, $325,000. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed? So voted. Town accountant, personal services, $145,747. Other expenses, $34,378. Total for the town accountant, $180,125. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed? So voted. Board of Assessors, personal services, $212,240. Other expenses, $48,440. For total for the assessors, $260,680. Any discussion? If not, then all those in favor say aye. Those opposed? So voted. Treasurer Collector, personal services, $365,443. Other expenses, $61,798. Total for the Treasurer Collector, $427,241. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed? So voted. Technology Department, personal services, $1,112,409. Other expenses, $135,786. Capital outlay, $46,226. Total for Technology Department, $294,421. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed? So voted. Town Clerk, personal services, $163,920. Other expenses, $9,890. Total for the Town Clerk, $173,810. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed? So voted. Elections, personal services, $8,635. Other expenses, $5,899. Total for elections, $14,534. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed? So voted. Conservation Commission, personal services, $51,486. Other expenses, $4,050. Total for the Conservation Commission, $55,518. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed? So voted. Planning Board, personal services, $101,949. Other expenses, $3,650. Total for the Planning Board, $105,599. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed? So voted. Zoning Board of Appeals, personal services, $6,680. Other expenses, $4,375. Zoning Board of Appeals, total, $11,055. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed? So voted. Economic Development, other expenses, $14,067. Total for Economic Development, $14,067. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed? So voted. Sustainability Coordinator, purchase services, $50,000. That's the total budgeted recommended amount. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed? So voted. Police Department, personal services, $2,991,438. Other expenses, $212,053. Capital outlay, $1,435. Total recommended budgeted amount for the police department is $3,204,926. Any discussion? Yes, yes, sir. Thank you for breaking up the monotony of my voice.
Scott McKechnie, 215 Dalton Road. Can someone just explain the operating expenses going up 52.2%? Because the last slide we saw up there, I think it was like 6% historically. So why 52%? Thank you.
Ken, do you want to field that or have the police chief do it?
Yeah. The quick answer to that is that money moved around within the budget, and that's partly because when we were in our defensive posture last year, the police department took money out of those areas to try to conserve cash, and they had to restore those back this year. So that's really why you see that.
Thank you. You content with that, Mr. McKechnie? Chief Stone, do you want to be heard? Or you content? He's content. Okay. Total budgeted amount as recommended for the police department is $3,204,926. Any further debate? If not, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed? So voted. Auxiliary police. Other expenses, $13,902. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed? So voted. Fire Department, personal services, $837,534. Other expenses, $97,606. Capital outlay, $13,608 for a total budgeted recommendation for the Fire Department of $948,748. Any discussion? Just passing by? Okay. Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed? So voted. Ambulance Department, personal services, $423,934. Other expenses, $163,150. Total for the ambulance, $587,084. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed? So voted. Building inspection, personal services, $150,379. Other expenses, $17,700. Building inspection, total, $168,079. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, so voted. Emergency management, personal services, $5,000. Other expenses, $17,589. Total from emergency management, $22,589. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, so voted. Animal control officer, $38,000. That's the total budgeted recommended amount. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, so voted. School department, personal services, $29,987,048. Other expenses, $6,906,168. Capital outlay, $205,307. Total school department recommended budget is $37,098,523. Any discussion? Yes, yes, sir.
John Varrell, 928 Washington Street. I'd just like to know what, if any, money is in this budget to address our poor performance when compared to our neighbors in national polls. U.S. News and World Report had us around 80. When I moved to the town almost 30 years ago, we were the envy of the area, and now we're not doing so well at all.
I'm not sure that the question, Mr. Verrill, I understand perhaps the motivation for the question or your disappointment, but I'm not sure that the question seeks information that could be provided to you.
What money in this allocation is to address that problem, or if there isn't any money in this budget to address that issue?
Okay. Does anybody from the school department want to be heard in response to the question? Yes.
Good evening, Susan Kuska, Superintendent of Schools. So I'm still under a year in Holliston and have been reviewing all of the things that the gentleman referred to. And one of the concerns we have right now is what are we going to do to address our learning gaps related to COVID? So some of the items that we put in the budget are additional tutors to support our students with intervention needs, a director of social emotional learning and equity to support the trauma of our students. We've also added some intervention programs for Tier 3 interventions, which we have not had a lot of resources for. And the other piece that we're moving towards is we are starting to look for a new strategic planning process. That is likely to begin in around September, October, and it will be a 4-year strategic plan because we really need to look to where do we want to be in Holliston 5 years from now, and then backwards plan to get there. And I'll be reaching out to the community for representation from our town municipal departments, as well as community representatives. So we don't have all the answers right now, but we're going to be putting a plan in place and having a consultant come in and help us with that process. And I believe that is the way to move forward in Holliston and make it a great place again. Thank you.
Thank you. Susan, you might know this, but once your children pass out of the school system, you have less contact with the school system. So I'm sorry. I apologize for not knowing who you are. I should know who you are, and I apologize for that. I'll know you the next time that I call on you.
Well, I started July 6th, so not a full year yet.
That's okay. Well, welcome. Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the requested appropriation in the amount of $37,098,523 for the school department, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed? So voted. At Keefe Technical School, the recommended appropriation, I presume this is our assessment for the participating students we have from town. Keefe Technical School, $1,421,995. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed? So voted. Department of Public Works, Personal Services, $843,626. Other expenses, $307,891. Capital outlay, $320,875. The total recommended budget amount for the DPW is $1,472,392. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed? So voted. Facilities Manager, Personal Services, $97,597. Other expenses, $177,288. Total for the Department of Facilities Manager is recommended $274,885. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed? So voted. Department of Public Works, snow and ice removal. Personal Services, $50,000. Other expenses, $200,000. Total for DPW, snow and ice, $250,000. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, so voted. Street lighting, $67,470. Any discussions? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, so voted. Solid waste, $1,318,183 recommended budget amount for solid waste. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed? So voted. Wastewater treatment, $97,700. That's the total recommended budget amount. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed? So voted. Other public works, motor vehicle fuels, $105,000. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed? So voted. Board of Health, Personal Services, $160,150. Other expenses, $8,450. Total for Board of Health, $168,600. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, so voted. Council on Aging, Personal Services, $206,668. Other expenses, $54,200. Total for the COA, $260,868. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, so voted. Youth Services, Personal services, $168,304. Other expenses, $13,226. Total for youth services, $161,530. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, so voted. Am I off? Did I miss something? Which one? Youth services, let's go back to that and vote. Our able town clerk has corrected me and indicates that the amount for personal services is $148,304. Other expenses, $13,226. The total for youth services is $161,530. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, thank you. Veteran services, other expenses, $44,433. Benefits, $50,000. Total for veteran services, $94,433. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, so voted. Library, personal services, $361,252. Other expenses, $166,556. Total for the library, $527,808. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, so voted. And on to the last sheet. Park Department, personal services, $132,174. Other expenses, $9,755. Total for parks, $141,929. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of that amount for the Park Department, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, so voted. Now, I have to refrain from editorial comment, but I can't help but focus on this one. Rail Trail, purchase services, $1,000. Any discussion with respect to the amount for the rail trail, $1,000? If not, then all those in favor say aye. Thank you. All those opposed, so voted. Celebrations, supplies and materials, $2,000. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of celebrations, $2,000, say aye. Those opposed, so voted. Debt service, purchase services, $4,000. Debt service, $2,401,138. Total for debt service, $2,405,138. Any discussion? Hearing, yes, Mr. McKechnie.
Scott McKechnie, 215 Dalton Road. I understand the debt service is coming down. That's wonderful. I was actually on the Finance Committee when a lot of that debt was put on for the schools. But could someone just give me an idea or what the balance of the debt is? This is debt service. I'm just curious.
Travis, do you want to handle that?
So let me just refer to anybody who has the document. We can also put up an image on the screen if it would help, but I think if I just refer to where we are in the document to show the debt schedule, it is page 59 of the printed document that you have out there. And this shows all of the debt by category. On the left is the fiscal year column, and you can see what is retired. So in FY21, the final year payment of the town hall came off, which has reduced 22. And that's a main reason in the FY22 budget that we have added capacity, but also I think, as has been referenced earlier, with future capital needs, that is capacity that we're going to need to look at future projects for. But it's 57, and you can look at all of the different categories inside and outside the levy, and the projects that are voted to be exempt are the ones that can go over Prop 2.5 for the life of the bond, and if it's not outside the levy, then it must be within the budget supported by Prop 2.5 revenue. Hope that answers the question.
Thank you. So the total amount of appropriations sought for debt service, again, is $2,405,138. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, so voted. County retirement benefits, $2,375,731. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, so voted. Workers' compensation benefits, $311,589. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, so voted. Unemployment benefits, $100,000. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, so voted. Employee benefits, insurance, $6,185,029. Benefits, $1,546,470. Employee benefits, $7,731,499. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed, so voted. Liability insurance, other expenses, $320,291. That's the total suggested appropriation. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, so voted. Department of Public Works Water, personal services, $935,745. Other expenses, $772,071. Capital outlay, $15,000. Debt service, $790,905. Total for DPW water, $2,513,721. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed? So voted. That completes the omnibus budget article in which the town has successfully spent $66,572,803. Now, we have 5 minutes to go until our cutoff time at 11 o'clock. Is the sense of the town meeting to continue to take a few more articles or to adjourn to tomorrow evening? Mr. Alfred, what would you like to do?
Oh, no one wants to know what I want to do.
All right, let's proceed then. Article 19, transfer, we'll proceed for 5 minutes till 11 o'clock. Why put off to tomorrow what we can do today? Transfer from available funds a sum of money for the capital expenditure fund. This is sponsored by the Select Board. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate a transfer from available funds a sum of money for the capital expenditure fund or take any action relative thereto. The motion is move that the town raise and appropriate $1,750,000 for the capital expenditure fund. Is there a second? Second. The explanation has been the custom of the town to annually transfer from reserves a sum of money to the capital expenditure fund to be used at the October special town meeting to fund capital expenditure requests. The FinCom recommends that the town raise and appropriate $1,750,000 for the capital expenditure fund, and their vote was unanimous. Any further discussion? If not, then all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? So voted. Article 20, sponsored by the Select Board, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate a transfer from available funds or borrow a sum of money for the purpose of capital expenditures, including replacement and new vehicles and equipment for the schools, facilities maintenance, police and public works departments, and authorize the Select Board to trade or sell used equipment toward part of the purchase price or take any action relative thereto. The items are delineated in the warrant, but I'll read them for the benefit of those at home. Police Department, building battery backup system, $11,750 is the estimated cost. Police, replace the I'll strike that, $13,750. Police Department, replace telephone system, $11,600. Police Department, voice recorder system, $10,000. Police Department, electronic key door system, $54,000. Facilities, security cameras in municipal buildings, $75,000. Facilities, central fire rehabilitation, $50,000. Facilities, 1750 Washington Street, HVAC package units, $33,500. DPW radio replacement, UHF frequency, $47,590. DPW pickup truck with rack body equipped, $55,000. School department, replace boilers, $55,000. School department networking infrastructure, $26,400, giving us a total of $431,840. The motion is moved that the town vote to appropriate $431,840 from the capital expenditure fund to fund the purchase of items listed in the article as printed. Is there a second? The suggested explanation is as follows. The town will often appropriate for capital expenditures at the October special town meeting. However, from time to time, departments need to purchase capital items in advance of that date, usually due to seasonal, safety, or other operational issues and requirements. The FinCom's recommendation was that the town appropriate the requested total amount of $433,840 from the funds as I've delineated from you above. Since this involves an appropriation from capital expenditure fund, it requires a 2/3 vote. So we're going to do it on a voice vote. If it's not unanimous, I'll take a hand count on it, but let's proceed to a voice vote. All those in favor of the expenditures as outlined in the article, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? So voted. And I think this is as good a place as any to stop. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn till tomorrow evening at the same 7:30. Is there a second? All those in favor? So voted. Thank you all, and hope to see you all here tomorrow night.
You got further than I thought we would.